End Zone Obsessed, a battle of wits, a clash of hearts, and a love they never saw coming, by Win Valentine.
Copyright 2025 by Win Valentine. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or localities, is entirely coincidental. Win Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. Designations used by companies to distinguish their products are often claimed as trademarks. All brand names and product names used in this book and on its cover are trade names, service marks, trademarks, and registered trademarks of their respective owners. The publishers and the book are not associated with any product or vendor mentioned in this book. None of the companies referenced within the book have endorsed the book. Book cover by Dana Sacco. Chapter 1: Sparks at the Stand. Reese wiped her hands on her apron and surveyed the growing line at the Shark Bite Shack. Friday night games always brought the crowds, but tonight felt especially chaotic. The air hummed with pregame excitement, and the scent of popcorn and grilled hot dogs wafted through the evening breeze. "Mom," Lily called from her perch on a stool in the corner of the stand. "Can I help with the nachos?" "Not tonight, sweetie. Remember what happened last time with the cheese dispenser?" Reese smiled at the memory of cleaning liquid cheese off the ceiling for hours after closing. She'd spent the better part of an evening on a ladder, scrubbing away evidence of what happened when an 8-year-old discovered the joys of pressurized cheese sauce. Her arms had ached for days. "That was one time," Lily protested, but went back to her homework with minimal grumbling, her pencil scratching against paper as she tackled her math problems. The line continued to grow, stretching past the corner of the stand. "Hot dogs. Get your hot dogs here," Reese called out, falling into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, making change, and keeping the line moving. She'd gotten good at this dance over the past few months, learning to anticipate rushes and juggle multiple orders at once, even if it wasn't exactly where she'd pictured herself at 29. The MBA gathering dust in her desk drawer back home was proof of that. "I'll take 2 dogs with everything," a deep voice said, "and maybe your number to go with it." Reese looked up to find herself staring into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen. Trent Walker, the Sharks star linebacker, was leaning against her counter with a grin that probably melted most women into puddles. His practice jersey clung to his broad shoulders, still damp from the evening's training session. Too bad she wasn't most women. "That'll be $8, she said flatly, focusing on the register instead of his smile. "For the hot dogs." "The number isn't on the menu." "Wow, is that really Trent Walker?" Lily bounced off her stool, homework forgotten, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, he's the one who scored that amazing touchdown last week. The way he just crashed through the defense was incredible." Trent's smile softened as he turned to Lily, his entire demeanor shifting from flirty to gentle. "That's right. And who might you be, sports expert?" "I'm Lily." "Mom, did you know he holds the record for most tackles in a single season? And he's never missed a game in 3 years." "Fascinating," Reese muttered, assembling his hot dogs with perhaps more force than necessary, squirting mustard and relish with sharp, efficient movements. "You know your stats," Trent said to Lily, clearly impressed. "Want to be my personal statistician? The pay's not great, but there's unlimited hot dogs involved." Lily giggled, her cheeks flushing pink, and Reese felt a twinge of annoyance at how easily he'd charmed her daughter. She slid his order across the counter, careful not to let their fingers brush. "Your hot dogs, Mr. Walker?" "There's a line forming." "Please call me Trent." He winked at her, his blue eyes twinkling. "Everyone does." "Oh my God, did you see that?" A woman in line whispered loudly to her friend, not bothering to keep her voice down. Trent Walker's totally hitting on the concession stand girl. Don't get your hopes up, her friend replied with a knowing smirk. He flirts with everyone. Remember last month when he was dating that yoga instructor? And before that, the lifeguard? Neither of them lasted more than a few weeks. Reese's jaw tightened, her shoulders tensing at the gossip. Just what she needed, a player with a reputation for loving and leaving them. She'd been down that road before, and she had the divorce papers to prove it. The last thing Lily needed was another disappointment in her life. A loud grinding noise interrupted her thoughts. The soda machine sputtered, spraying sticky liquid across the counter in a fountain of fizzy chaos. No, 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 Reese muttered, rushing to stop the spray. She yanked on the lever, but it only made things worse. Soda pooled on the counter, threatening to drip onto her shoes, the sweet smell of cola filling the air, as her perfectly organized evening descended into sticky chaos. Need a hand? Trent was still there, already rolling up his sleeves. I've got it under control, Reese said through gritted teeth, though evidence suggested otherwise. Come on, let me help. I used to fix these machines all the time when I worked concessions in college. You worked concessions? Reese couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. What, you think I came out of the womb throwing footballs? He grinned. Some of us had to work our way through school. Before she could protest further, he'd slipped behind the counter and was examining the machine. Reese was acutely aware of his presence. He took up too much space, smelled too good, like fresh laundry and something uniquely masculine, and was way too close for comfort. His shoulder brushed against hers as he leaned in, sending an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Just need to. He reached for something, and suddenly the machine gave an angry gurgle. A jet of soda shot up, catching them both in the spray. The sticky sweetness filled her nose as droplets rained down on them like some sort of carbonated nightmare. Reese gasped as the cold liquid hit her face, feeling it seep through her carefully pressed uniform shirt. Trent looked equally shocked, his hair dripping with cola, those blue eyes wide with surprise. For a moment they just stared at each other, and then Lily's laughter broke the tension. Reese fought the urge to smooth back his dampened hair. Mom, you look like a wet cat, she giggled from her safe spot behind the counter. Trent chuckled, wiping his face with his sleeve. Sorry about that. Let me try one more time. He reached behind the machine, did something Reese couldn't see, and the sputtering stopped. The silence felt almost deafening after the chaos. There we go. The pressure valve was stuck. Thanks, Reese said reluctantly, accepting the handful of napkins he offered, trying not to notice how his fingers grazed hers in the exchange. Though I could have handled it myself. Of course you could have. His eyes twinkled with that infuriating mix of amusement and something else she refused to name. But then I would have missed out on this lovely shower. Though I usually prefer my soda in a cup. Don't you have a game to prepare for? She dabbed at her shirt, knowing the stickiness would linger all day, just like the memory of his closeness. Are you trying to get rid of me, Reese? What gave it away? He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a rumble that she felt more than heard. You know, most people find me quite charming. Most people don't have to watch you flirt with half the town while they're trying to work, she shot back, ignoring the flutter in her stomach at his proximity. Ah, so you've been watching me? His grin widened, showing off those perfect teeth that had probably sold 1,000 toothpaste commercials. Hard not to when you're constantly making a spectacle of yourself. Mom, Lily interrupted, bouncing on her toes with excitement, can Trent come back tomorrow? He promised to teach me more about football statistics. Reese saw the genuine warmth in Trent's eyes as he looked at her daughter, and it made him even more dangerous. The way he softened around Lily was like a sucker punch to her carefully constructed defenses. I'm sure Mr. Walker has better things to do than hang around at concession stand. Actually, he said, grabbing his now cold hot dogs, I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. See you tomorrow, Lily? He turned to Reese with that infuriating smile. And I'll see you too, whether you like it or not. As he walked away, Reese couldn't decide what annoyed her more, his overconfidence or the fact that part of her was looking forward to tomorrow despite herself. I like him, Lily declared, returning to her homework. You like everyone? Reese muttered, turning back to her waiting customers. But she couldn't quite shake the lingering warmth of Trent's smile, or the way he'd made Lily laugh. And that, she decided, was exactly the problem. The Friday night crowd had thinned as kickoff approached, giving Reese a moment to catch her breath and wipe down the sticky counter. She could still feel traces of dried soda in her hair, an unwelcome reminder of Trent Walker's help. Mom? Lily's voice carried that thoughtful tone that usually preceded difficult questions. Why don't you like Trent? He seems really nice. Reese's hand stilled on the counter. What makes you think I don't like him? You get all? Lily scrunched up her face, clearly searching for the right word. Prickly. Like Mrs. Peterson's cat when someone tries to pet it. I do not get prickly, Reese protested, though the comparison was uncomfortably accurate. She softened her voice. I just think it's better if we keep things professional. He's a customer, that's all. But he made you laugh when the soda exploded. Lily twirled her pencil between her fingers. You don't laugh like that very often anymore. The observation hit Reese like a punch to the gut. When had her 8-year-old gotten so perceptive? She glanced out at the field, where the players were warming up in their navy and silver uniforms. Trent was easy to spot, his powerful frame and fluid movements commanding attention even from a distance. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up toward the concession stand and raised a hand in greeting, that familiar warmth in his blue eyes making her stomach flutter traitorously. Reese quickly turned away, busying herself with restocking napkins, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Sometimes people can seem nice on the surface, sweetie, but that doesn't mean they're reliable. Life isn't always that simple. Like Daddy? The innocent question made Reese's chest ache, memories of broken promises and tearful explanations flooding back. That's different. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words while keeping her voice steady. I just want to be careful about who we let into our lives. We're doing okay, just the two of us, aren't we? We have our routine, our home, our friends. Yeah, but... Lily hesitated, twirling a strand of auburn hair around her finger. Sometimes I think you're lonely. You work so hard, and you never go out like Mrs. Peterson does with her book club. Before Reese could respond, the crowd erupted in cheers as the teams took the field, the familiar roar of excitement filling the stadium. She watched as Trent jogged to his position, his confidence evident in every movement of his athletic frame. Throughout the first quarter, she caught him glancing up at the concession stand between plays, his gaze finding hers through the crowd. Each time their eyes met, he'd flash that irritatingly charming smile that made her pulse quicken, and she'd force herself to look away, reminding herself of all the reasons she needed to stay focused. The routine was starting to feel familiar, too familiar. It reminded her of how Mark had pursued her in college, all charm and promises, right up until Lily came along, and suddenly being a father wasn't as appealing as his law career and corner office dreams. Reese had spent the last 3 years rebuilding their lives, making sure Lily had stability, even if it meant working 2 jobs and moving to a new town where nobody knew their history or pitied the single mom. She'd learned to be self-sufficient, to anticipate problems before they arose, to never depend on anyone else for their happiness or security. The concession stand might not be glamorous, but it was hers to manage, a space where she could prove her independence. She had control here, and control meant safety for both her and Lily. Mom. Lily's excited voice broke through her thoughts, her green eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Look, Trent just made an amazing tackle. Did you see how fast he moved? Reese couldn't help but watch as Trent helped his teammate up, the two of them celebrating the defensive stop with a quick chest bump. She had to admit, there was something compelling about the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, competitive but still supportive of his teammates. The way he interacted with others spoke of a genuine warmth that made her carefully constructed walls feel just a little less secure. The game ended with the Sharks' victory, and as the crowd began to disperse, Reese started her closing routine. She was counting the register when a shadow fell across the counter, bringing with it the faint scent of soap and aftershave that was becoming frustratingly familiar. Quite a game, huh? Trent's voice was warm with victory. He'd already showered and changed, his hair still damp, wearing a fitted Navy Sharks t-shirt that did nothing to hide his athletic build. I was busy working, Reese said, not looking up from her counting, though her fingers fumbled slightly on the bills. Didn't see much of it. Really? Because I could have sworn I felt someone watching me from up here. The teasing note in his voice made her cheeks warm, and she silently cursed her fair complexion that always gave her away. That was me. Lily piped up, bouncing on her toes with excitement. I was watching you play. You're really good. That last tackle was amazing. Trent's face lit up, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. Thanks, kiddo. Maybe I can teach you some moves sometime, with your mom's permission, of course. He glanced at Reese, his expression turning more serious, the playfulness replaced by something that made her stomach flutter. I know you think you've got me figured out, but you might be surprised. I doubt that, Reese said, finally meeting his gaze and immediately regretting it. I've met plenty of charming athletes before. Have you met any who volunteer at the youth center 3 times a week? Or who started a mentoring program for kids who can't afford private coaching? He leaned forward slightly, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. I'm not asking for much, Reese. Just a chance to prove I'm not who you think I am. Something in his tone made her pause. There was a sincerity there that didn't fit with the playboy image she'd constructed. A quiet determination that made her carefully built walls feel suddenly less secure. I'll be back tomorrow, he continued, stepping back from the counter, leaving a lingering warmth in his wake. Maybe by then, you'll be ready to give me the benefit of the doubt. As he walked away, Lily sighed dreamily, propping her chin on her hands. He's like a prince in those movies we watch. Did you see how he helped Tommy up after that tackle? Life isn't a movie, sweetheart, Reese said, but the words lacked conviction. She watched Trent's retreating figure, remembering how easily he'd connected with Lily, how quick he'd been to help with the soda machine earlier that day, how genuine his smile had seemed when talking about his volunteer work. The way his whole face had softened when he mentioned the kids he mentored. No? She shook her head, squaring her shoulders and forcing her attention back to the register. She had a business to run and a daughter to raise. She couldn't afford to be distracted by charming linebackers with surprising depths, no matter how good they were with kids, or how disarming their smiles might be. No matter how much his unexpected kindness made her wonder if there was more to Trent Walker than she'd allowed herself to see. Come on, Lily, she said, gathering their things. Time to head home. We've got another busy day tomorrow. But as they walked to the car, Reese couldn't quite shake the feeling that her carefully constructed walls might not be as impenetrable as she'd thought. And that, more than anything, was what scared her. Chapter 2: The First Assist. Trent adjusted his shark's cap and strode toward the shark bite shack, ignoring the flutter of nerves in his stomach. He wasn't used to feeling uncertain around women, but something about Reese Callahan's sharp green eyes and dismissive attitude got under his skin. In a good way. Back so soon? Reese didn't look up from the register as he approached. The soda machine's working fine. Actually, I'm here to volunteer. He flashed his most winning smile, the one that usually worked wonders. Coach mentioned you were short-staffed, and I've got time before practice. That got her attention. She paused, a stack of bills in her hand, and fixed him with a skeptical look. You want to work? Here. Is that so hard to believe? Yes. But he caught the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, almost like she was fighting a smile. Fine. You can restock the nachos. Trent rolled up his sleeves and got to work, secretly pleased when Reese's eyes lingered on his forearms for a moment too long. He flexed slightly, pretending to adjust his grip on the nacho container. The stand was busy, but not packed, giving him plenty of opportunities to observe her in action. She moved with efficient grace, handling multiple orders while keeping an eye on Lily, who was doing homework at a small table in the corner. The sight of them together tugged at something in his chest he wasn't ready to examine too closely. So, he ventured during a brief lull, wiping his hands on the black apron she'd thrust at him earlier. How long have you been running this place? 3 months. Her answers were clipped, professional. The nacho cheese is getting low. On it, boss. He winked, earning an eye roll that somehow made him want to try harder. Something about the way she brushed off his charm only made him more determined to crack that professional facade. You know, I make a mean cheese sauce. Family recipe. We use the standard supplier. Your loss. My secret ingredient? Mr. Walker. Lily's voice cut through their exchange, bright and eager. Can you help me with my math homework? Mom's too busy. Before Reese could object, Trent was already heading over to Lily's table, grateful for the excuse to escape the tension crackling between him and her mother. Math, huh? That was my best subject in school. It wasn't, but he'd always been good at finding creative ways to solve problems. Besides, there was something about Lily's eager face that made him want to be the hero she clearly thought he was. As he sat down beside Lily, he noticed her shoulders were slightly hunched, her usual sparkle dimmed. The protective instinct that made him such a formidable linebacker flared to life. What's bothering you, kiddo? And don't say fractions because nobody likes those. Lily giggled, but it faded quickly. The other kids make fun of me because I get the answers wrong sometimes. Jenny Miller said I was stupid yesterday. Trent's jaw tightened, a familiar anger burning in his gut. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Reese pause in her work, listening. Well, Jenny Miller sounds like she needs a lesson in being kind. You know what? I used to get answers wrong all the time. You did. Lily's eyes widened. But you're a football player. Exactly. And you know what helped me? I turned everything into a game. He grabbed her pencil and drew little footballs around her math problems, remembering how his own mother had used similar tricks to help him focus. See? Now each question is like scoring a touchdown. And just like in football, it's okay to take your time and think about your strategy. For the next few minutes, he helped Lily work through her homework, making her laugh by dramatically celebrating each correct answer with quiet touchdown dances that had her giggling behind her hand. When she finally solved a particularly tricky problem, her face lit up with pride. Mom? Look. I did it. Reese appeared beside their table, her expression softer than he'd seen it. That's great, sweetie. She met Trent's eyes briefly, something unreadable in her gaze that made his heart skip. Thank you, she added quietly. The moment was broken by a group of fans approaching the counter. Trent heard snippets of their conversation as he returned to his post, his good mood evaporating with each word. That's Trent Walker, right? God, he's even hotter up close. Didn't he date that yoga instructor last month? And wasn't he seen with Sarah from the coffee shop before that? Classic Walker. Never stays with anyone long enough to learn their coffee order. The words stung more than they should have, hitting too close to the fears that kept him up at night. Trent focused on restocking cups, trying to ignore the way Reese's shoulders had tensed at the gossip. He was tired of being the town's favorite topic of conversation, tired of having his past relationships dissected like plays on the field, tired of people assuming they knew him based on a reputation he'd never wanted. Don't let them bother you, Reese said suddenly, surprising him. When he looked up, her expression was neutral, but there was something almost sympathetic in her voice that made his chest tight. Small towns love their stories. Even when they're not true? The words came out more bitter than he'd intended, revealing more vulnerability than he was comfortable showing. She studied him for a moment, then shrugged. Maybe you should give them different stories to tell. Before he could respond, another rush of customers arrived, and they fell into an unexpectedly smooth rhythm of working together. Trent found himself watching Reese when she wasn't looking. The way she tucked loose strands of auburn hair behind her ear, how her whole face transformed when she smiled at Lily, the quiet strength in her movements as she managed the controlled chaos of the concession stand. He realized, with a jolt of clarity that scared him, that he wanted to be part of their story, even if he wasn't sure he deserved to be. He was beginning to realize that breaking down Reese Callahan's walls would take more than charm and a few good deeds. But as he watched her help Lily pack up her homework, laughing at something her daughter said, Trent knew he wanted to try. Not because she was a challenge, but because something told him that earning Reese's trust would be worth every effort. The way she softened around Lily, letting her guard down just enough to show glimpses of the woman beneath the protective armor, made his chest tighten with unexpected longing. The afternoon sun slanted through the stand's windows, casting long shadows across the counter. Practice would start soon, but Trent found himself reluctant to leave. He'd barely made a dent in changing Reese's opinion of him, but helping Lily had felt good, real in a way that most of his interactions lately hadn't been. His reputation as the team's charming playboy suddenly felt hollow, meaningless compared to the genuine smile Lily had given him when he'd helped her with her math problems, or the brief moment when Reese's eyes had met his with something that might have been gratitude. Trent felt the shift in Reese's demeanor immediately after the gossip. The tentative warmth she'd shown during his interaction with Lily vanished, replaced by an icy efficiency that made his chest tighten. She barely looked at him as she moved around the stand, her movements sharp and precise. "Need any help with those boxes?" he asked, watching her struggle with a stack of supply crates. His fingers itched to take them from her, remembering how his mother used to stubbornly insist on carrying everything herself after the divorce, as if accepting help meant admitting weakness. "I've got it." She shouldered past him, her jaw set in that familiar stubborn line that both frustrated and intrigued him. "Shouldn't you be heading to practice?" "I've got time." He stepped closer, lowering his voice and catching a hint of her vanilla-scented shampoo. "Listen, about what those women said. It's none of my business." Reese cut him off, but her grip on the boxes tightened until her knuckles went white. "Your dating life isn't exactly relevant to running a concession stand." "No, but..." "Look, Trent." She finally met his eyes, and the guarded look in them hit him like a tackle to the chest, reminding him of every relationship he'd screwed up by keeping people at arm's length. "I appreciate you helping Lily with her homework. Really. But I don't have time to be another story for people to gossip about. More importantly, I can't risk Lily getting attached to someone who..." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Someone who wouldn't stick around. Just like his dad hadn't. "You don't know me," he said, fighting to keep his voice even as old wounds threatened to surface. "I know enough." She turned away, effectively ending the conversation. "The napkin dispensers need refilling." Trent stood there for a moment, frustration building in his chest like a pre-game adrenaline rush. He was used to people making assumptions about him, had even played into those assumptions more times than he cared to count, but somehow Reese's judgment stung more. Maybe because for the first time in a long while, he actually cared what someone thought. Maybe because when he looked at her and Lily, he saw something worth fighting for. Fine. If she wouldn't listen to his words, he'd show her through actions. His father had taught him at least one valuable lesson: talk was cheap. Throughout the game, he split his attention between the field and the concession stand, earning a few concerned looks from his teammates. Every time coach called a break, Trent was there, restocking supplies, wiping down counters, doing whatever needed to be done without being asked. He caught Reese watching him once or twice, confusion flickering across her face before she caught herself and looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. The Sharks won, but Trent barely registered the victory celebration or his teammates' invitations to grab beers at the local bar. As soon as coach dismissed them, he headed straight for the Shark Bite Shack. The post-game rush was winding down, and Lily had fallen asleep on her homework table, her math problems still surrounded by his football doodles. The sight made something warm unfurl in his chest. Without a word, he grabbed a mop and started cleaning the floor, working his way methodically through the sticky patches of spilled soda and crushed popcorn. He could feel Reese's eyes on him as she counted the register, the quiet clicks of the buttons punctuating the comfortable silence between them. "You don't have to do that," she said finally, her voice softer than it had been all day. "I know." He kept mopping, focusing on a particularly stubborn nacho cheese stain, and trying not to read too much into the way her tone had changed. But I want to. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Trent paused, leaning on the mop handle as he considered his answer, feeling the worn wood press into his calloused palms. Because contrary to popular belief, I actually care about more than just my reputation. Because Lily deserves to have her homework space clean. Because you work hard, and everyone needs help sometimes, even if they're too stubborn to ask for it. The words came out more earnestly than he'd intended, weighted with truths he usually kept buried beneath easy smiles and casual flirtation. He risked a glance at her, his heart beating a little faster than he'd like to admit. Reese was staring at him, her expression unreadable in the dim post-game lighting that cast shadows across her face, making her seem somehow both softer and more mysterious. And, he added quietly, throat tight with honesty, because maybe I'm tired of being the guy everyone thinks they have figured out. The admission felt dangerous, like removing his protective gear before a big play. Something shifted in her eyes, not quite trust but maybe the beginning of understanding. She looked away first, busying herself with organizing receipts, the paper crackling beneath her nervous fingers. The bleach is under the sink, she said after a moment. For the tough stains. It wasn't much, but Trent recognized the olive branch for what it was, warmth spreading through his chest. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the squeak of his mop against the linoleum and the rustle of her paperwork. Occasionally, Lily would mumble something in her sleep from her makeshift bed of chairs, making them both smile despite themselves. He found himself stealing glances at the little girl, remembering how proudly she'd shown him her completed math problems earlier. When the stand was finally clean, Trent helped Reese close up, careful not to overstep the fragile peace between them. As she gathered Lily's things, preparing to wake her, she paused, her hand stilling on the backpack. "You were good with her today," she said softly. "With the math?" Her words carried a weight that made his chest tighten. "She's a great kid." He meant it with every fiber of his being, surprised by how quickly Lily had wormed her way into his heart. "Yes, she is." Reese hesitated, then added, "And that's why I have to be careful. It's not just my heart I'm protecting." She wrapped her arms around herself, as if warding off a chill. The admission cost her. He could see it in the way she immediately tensed, like a player anticipating a hit, as if regretting the moment of vulnerability. But before he could respond, could tell her how much he understood and respected that, she was gently shaking Lily awake, gathering their belongings with practiced efficiency. "Thank you for your help today," she said formally, professional mask back in place. But there was something different in her voice now, a slight wavering of her earlier certainty that gave him hope. Trent watched them leave, Lily sleepily holding her mother's hand as they walked toward the parking lot, their silhouettes merging with the shadows. He'd made progress today, however small. But as he listened to their footsteps fade into the night, the echo of cleats against concrete reminding him of countless post-game exits, he realized that earning Reese's trust would require more than one afternoon of good behavior. For the first time in his life, he found himself truly willing to put in the work, no matter how long it took. For the first time in his life, he was ready for that kind of commitment. The question was, would she ever believe him? Chapter 3: Bullies and Banter. Reese stared at the email from Mrs. Harrison, her stomach twisting into knots. The words blurred together, but the message was clear: Lily's situation at school had escalated. According to her teacher, Lily had been eating lunch alone for the past week, and a group of girls had started excluding her from recess activities. She pressed her fingers to her temples, fighting back a headache that threatened to bloom into a full-blown migraine. The thought of her daughter's suffering made her chest ache with an almost physical pain. This wasn't supposed to happen in Ocean View. They'd moved here for a fresh start, away from the chaos and cruelty of the city, seeking the warmth of small-town life that had seemed so promising in the beginning. "Mom?" Lily's voice drifted from the living room, soft and hesitant. "Can you help me with my math homework?" "Coming, sweetie." Reese closed her laptop with perhaps more force than necessary and forced a smile onto her face, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She wouldn't let Lily see her worry, wouldn't add that burden to her daughter's shoulders. Later that week, Reese sat across from Principal Matthews, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She focused on keeping her breathing even as the meeting spiraled further from what she'd hoped, the familiar scent of coffee and old books doing nothing to calm her nerves. "While we take bullying very seriously, Mrs. Callahan," the principal said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with manicured fingers, "these situations are often complex. We'll continue to monitor the situation closely." "Monitor?" Reese's voice came out sharper than intended, edged with the frustration she'd been bottling up for weeks. "My daughter is being isolated and targeted. She needs more than monitoring. She needs action. Perhaps if Lily made more of an effort to participate in group activities." "She's 8, Reese cut in, heat rising to her cheeks as maternal instinct flared. "It's not her job to manage group dynamics. That's what the teachers are for. That's what this school is supposed to be for." The principal's patronizing smile only fueled her frustration, making her feel like she was being dismissed as just another overprotective parent. By the time she left his office, walking past cheerful bulletin boards and children's artwork, Reese felt more helpless than before, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Friday night's game brought its usual chaos to the Shark Bite Shack, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and grilled hot dogs. Reese moved on autopilot, filling orders and making change with practiced efficiency, but her mind kept drifting to Lily, who sat quietly in her usual spot behind the counter, small fingers absently tracing patterns on her notebook. "2 hot dogs and a large soda," a familiar voice called out over the crowd noise. Reese looked up to find Trent leaning against the counter, still in his practice gear, his blonde hair slightly damp with sweat. His usual easy smile faltered when he met her eyes, concern replacing his typical cockiness. "Everything okay?" "Fine," she said shortly, turning to grab the hot dogs, trying to ignore how his presence seemed to fill the small space. "Shouldn't you be warming up?" "Got a few minutes." He didn't move, studying her with those 2 perceptive blue eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. "You sure you're all right? You seem—" "I said I'm fine." She practically slammed his order on the counter, the wrapper crinkling under her fingers. "That'll be $8.50. Instead of leaving, Trent crouched down to Lily's level, his massive frame somehow making the gesture look natural. "Hey kiddo. Want to help me warm up before the game? Coach says I need to work on my passing, and I could use an expert's opinion." Lily's face lit up for the first time in days, hope breaking through her recent melancholy like sunshine through clouds. She looked at Reese hopefully, practically bouncing in her seat. "Can I, Mom? Please?" Reese hesitated, glancing at the growing line of customers. The stand was busy, but Marie could handle it for a few minutes. And seeing Lily smile like that. "Stay where I can see you," she relented, trying to ignore the warm feeling in her chest when Trent winked at her daughter. Throughout the game, Reese noticed how Lily gravitated toward Trent during his breaks, trailing after him like a tiny shadow in her oversized Sharks jersey. He'd toss her easy passes, showing her how to catch properly with patient instructions and genuine enthusiasm, and celebrate each successful catch like she'd scored the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Despite her reservations about the linebacker's reputation, Reese couldn't help but notice how natural he was with Lily, how her daughter's confidence seemed to grow with each moment of attention. It wasn't until the 4th quarter that Trent appeared at the counter again, his jersey dark with sweat and his hair plastered to his forehead. "Okay, spill it," he said quietly while Lily was distracted by organizing straws into neat rainbow patterns. "What's really going on?" "It's nothing." Reese busied herself wiping down the already clean counter, focusing on a non-existent spot to avoid meeting his concerned gaze. "Right? Because nothing always makes you look like you're about to cry or punch someone." His voice softened, gentle in a way that made her chest ache. "Come on, Reese. Let me help." Maybe it was exhaustion from the long day, or maybe it was the genuine concern in his ocean blue eyes, but Reese found herself talking. "Lily's having trouble at school. Some girls are." She swallowed hard, her throat tight with maternal worry. "They're excluding her, making her feel like she doesn't belong." making comments about her clothes, her lunch, everything. The school's being useless about it, and I don't, her voice cracked, betraying the emotion she'd been trying to contain all week. I don't know how to fix it. Trent was quiet for a moment, watching Lily meticulously arrange the straws by color, her small face scrunched in concentration. You know, he said finally, leaning against the counter, I used to get picked on in middle school. Reese snorted, unable to picture it. You? The town golden boy? Hard to believe, right? He grinned, though she caught a flicker of old hurt in his expression. I was shorter than everyone else until 9th grade. But my coach taught me something that changed everything. It wasn't about being the biggest or strongest. It was about believing in yourself. That's very inspirational, but... Let me teach her some self-defense basics, he interrupted, his voice low and earnest. Not to fight, just enough to help her feel confident. Plus some strategies for handling bullies that don't involve throwing punches. I work with kids at the community center sometimes. It helps, Reese. I promise. She studied him, trying to reconcile this thoughtful offer with the playboy reputation that preceded him. The gentle way he spoke about helping her daughter didn't match the stories she'd heard around town. Why do you care? His eyes met hers, startlingly sincere. Because no kid should feel scared or alone. And because... He glanced at Lily, then back to Reese, something vulnerable crossing his features. Maybe I'm tired of people assuming they know everything about me, based on gossip and old stories. The crowd erupted in cheers, breaking the moment. Trent straightened up, adjusting his helmet with practiced ease. Think about it, he said. Offer stands whenever you're ready. As he jogged back to the field, his broad shoulders disappearing into the sea of players, Reese watched him go, feeling something shift in her chest. Maybe she'd been too quick to judge. Maybe there was more to Trent Walker than she'd allowed herself to see, more than the charming smile and easy flirtation she'd been determined to resist. Lily appeared at her side, clutching a perfectly organized handful of straws. Mom? Can I tell you something? Always, baby. When I'm with Trent, I don't feel scared anymore. Lily's voice was small but sure. He makes me feel brave. Reese wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, thinking about Trent's offer. Yeah, she said softly. I'm starting to see that. Reese pulled into the parking lot of Iron Tide, her fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. The gym's weathered brick exterior looked more intimidating than she'd expected, especially with the early morning shadows stretching across the lot. Is this where the Sharks practice? Lily bounced in her seat, already unbuckling her seatbelt. Sometimes. Reese checked her phone again, rereading Trent's message. He'd suggested meeting before the morning rush, when the gym would be quieter. Remember, honey, if you're uncomfortable at any point. I know, Mom. We can leave. Lily was already out of the car, practically vibrating with excitement. Inside, the gym smelled of rubber mats, determination, and a hint of cleaning solution. Various pieces of equipment lined the exposed brick walls, everything from well-worn free weights to complicated-looking machines. And despite the early hour, a few dedicated souls were already working out, their quiet grunts mixing with the whir of a distant fan. Reese spotted Trent immediately, setting up an area with exercise mats in a corner, methodically arranging them into a perfect square. He looked different here, more focused, less of the easygoing charmer she usually saw at games. He wore a faded Sharks t-shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders and gym shorts, his hair slightly messy like he'd already been working out. When he caught sight of them, his whole face lit up, transforming his intense expression into that familiar warm smile that always made her stomach do an annoying little flip. There's my favorite assistant coach. He high-fived Lily, who giggled and bounced on her toes. Ready to learn some super-secret football player moves? Yeah. Lily's enthusiasm made Reese's heart squeeze. It had been weeks since she'd seen her daughter this animated, this eager to try something new. The contrast to her recent withdrawn behavior at school was striking. Mrs. Callahan. Trent nodded at her, his expression turning more serious, though his blue eyes remained gentle. I've got some chairs set up over there if you want to watch. I know this is a big step. It's Reese, she corrected automatically, then added, fidgeting with her car keys, and thank you for doing this. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, something unreadable flickering across his face. Thank you for trusting me. The next hour was a revelation. Trent started with simple exercises, teaching Lily proper stance and balance, breaking down each movement into easy-to-follow steps. He made everything into a game, telling stories about famous football players who'd overcome obstacles, seamlessly weaving in lessons about confidence and standing up for yourself. His voice remained steady and encouraging, never once showing frustration when Lily needed extra time to get something right. See, the trick isn't about being the biggest or strongest, he explained, demonstrating a defensive stance that highlighted years of training. It's about being smart and knowing your worth. When someone tries to make you feel small, you stand tall, just like this. Lily mimicked his position, her face scrunched in concentration, pigtails swaying as she adjusted her feet. Like a quarterback? Exactly like a quarterback. They have to stand strong in the pocket, even when everything's chaos around them. He adjusted her shoulders slightly with careful hands. Perfect. Now what do we say when someone tries to make us feel bad? Their words can't tackle me, Lily declared, making Trent beam with pride, his entire face glowing with genuine joy at her progress. Reese found herself leaning forward in her chair, captivated by their interaction. There was nothing showy or artificial about Trent here. He was patient, attentive, and somehow knew exactly how to break through Lily's shell. It was a side of him she'd never expected to see, and it was becoming harder to reconcile this version of Trent with the flirtatious player she'd been so determined to keep at arm's length. When they moved on to some basic self-defense moves, Reese tensed in her folding chair, her fingers gripping the armrests as maternal instinct warred with logic. But Trent caught her eye, his steady gaze somehow both reassuring and understanding. "Don't worry," he said softly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "These are just confidence builders. The real lesson is about using your voice and knowing when to walk away or get help." He demonstrated a simple wrist grab escape, transforming what could have been a scary move into something playful, making it look like a dance move and causing Lily to dissolve into uncontrollable giggles. The sound of her daughter's laughter eased some of the tension in Reese's shoulders. Sometimes the best defense is just knowing you can get away if you need to. But what's the first thing we do if someone's bothering us? "Tell a teacher or grown-up we trust," Lily recited with perfect clarity, practicing the escape move with exaggerated flourish that reminded Reese of a ballerina mid-twirl. "And if they don't listen? Keep telling different grown-ups until someone helps." Reese swallowed hard, a knot forming in her throat as she remembered her frustrating meeting with the principal, the way he'd dismissed her concerns with platitudes about kids being kids. Trent must have noticed her expression because he called for a water break, sending Lily bouncing off to the drinking fountain with infectious enthusiasm. "You okay?" He grabbed a towel, wiping his face as he approached Reese's chair. Even slightly winded from the workout, he carried himself with an easy grace that seemed at odds with his size. She gestured vaguely, struggling to articulate the mix of emotions swirling inside her. "You're good with her. Really good. I wasn't expecting." "You weren't expecting the team playboy to know how to handle kids?" His tone was light, teasing even, but something flickered in his eyes, a hint of hurt maybe or resignation. "That's not," but the words died in her throat because it wasn't it? She judged him based on rumors and reputation, never bothering to look deeper. Heat crept into her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I made assumptions." He shrugged, the movement casual, but she could tell her words meant something to him. The way his shoulders relaxed slightly, how his eyes softened at the edges. People usually do. It's easier than getting to know someone, right? Before she could respond, Lily came bounding back, her face flushed with excitement and damp wisps of hair clinging to her forehead. "Mom? Did you see? I learned how to be strong like a quarterback." "I saw, baby." Reese smiled, running a hand over her daughter's hair, smoothing the flyaways with gentle fingers. "You're doing amazing. Can we come back tomorrow?" Lily looked between them hopefully, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "Please?" Trent caught Reese's eye, leaving the decision entirely to her. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about his respect for her boundaries as a parent. The fact that he didn't try to influence Lily's request or pressure Reese's answer made something warm unfurl in her chest. "How about we start with twice a week?" Reese suggested, surprising herself. "Tuesday and Thursday mornings, if that works for Trent." "Works for me." His smile was different now, softer, more genuine than his usual easy grin. "But only if you promise to join us sometimes, Reese. Can't have Lily here becoming the only tough one in the family." "Mom's already tough," Lily declared loyally. "She fixes the soda machine all by herself." "Oh, really?" Trent's eyes danced with amusement. "That's not how I remember it." "You mean when you helped and got sprayed in the face?" Reese couldn't help but smile at the memory. "My hero. Hey, I took that soda blast like a champ." He clutched his chest in mock offense. "Besides, it was worth it to see you try not to laugh." I wasn't, but she had been, hadn't she? Even then, when she'd been determined not to like him, he'd made her smile. They wrapped up the session with some cool-down stretches, and Trent showed Lily how to properly fist bump, a very important skill for any athlete, he insisted solemnly. As they gathered their things to leave, Trent handed Reese a business card. "My cell's on there. Text me if you need to reschedule or..." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking almost shy. "Or if you just want to talk. About Lily or whatever." "Whatever?" Reese raised an eyebrow, but her tone was teasing rather than defensive. "Yeah, you know. Weather, sports, your secret passion for fixing soda machines." He grinned. "I'm told I'm a pretty good listener when I'm not being sprayed in the face." Reese tucked the card into her pocket, trying to ignore the warm flutter in her chest. "We'll see." "Mom." Lily called from the door. "We're gonna be late for school." "Coming?" Reese turned back to Trent. "Thank you." "Really? This means, well, it means a lot." "Any time?" He held her gaze for a moment, and Reese felt something shift between them, like a wall coming down, brick by careful brick. "See you at the game Friday?" "Where else would I be?" She smiled, surprising herself with how natural it felt. Someone has to keep that soda machine in line. As they drove to school, Lily chattered excitedly about everything she'd learned, but Reese found her thoughts drifting back to Trent. To the gentle way he'd worked with Lily, the respect he'd shown for Reese's boundaries, the glimpses of depth beneath his playful exterior. Maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about him. And maybe that wasn't such a scary thought after all. Chapter 4: Building Trust. Trent wiped down the counter of the Shark Bite Shack for what felt like the 100th time that evening, stealing glances at Reese as she efficiently worked the register. 2 weeks of volunteering hadn't exactly transformed him into a concession stand expert, but he'd mastered the basics, and more importantly, he'd caught glimpses of Reese's genuine smile when she thought he wasn't looking. "Walker." A familiar voice called out. "Trading in your jersey for an apron permanently?" Trent looked up to find Marcus Chen, one of his teammates, leaning against the counter with a shit-eating grin that made him want to throw a handful of nachos in his face. "Just helping out, man. Someone's gotta keep this place running smooth," he said, trying to keep his tone casual while wiping his suddenly sweaty palms on his apron. Sure. Marcus waggled his eyebrows, looking far too pleased with himself. "Nothing to do with the pretty manager, right?" Heat crept up Trent's neck, and he cursed his fair complexion for probably making it obvious to everyone within a 10-foot radius. "You want your nachos or not?" He focused intently on arranging the cheese sauce in a perfectly even layer, as if it were the most crucial task in the world. "Hey, no judgment here." Marcus raised his hands in surrender, that insufferable grin still plastered on his face. "It's kind of sweet, actually." The mighty Trent Walker, reformed by love. "That'll be $8.50, Trent said flatly, sliding the nachos across the counter with perhaps a bit more force than necessary. He could feel Reese tensing beside him, her movements becoming more rigid as she pretended not to listen. The familiar scent of her coconut shampoo drifted his way, making it harder to maintain his poker face. Marcus dropped a 10 on the counter, his eyes dancing with amusement. Keep the change, lover boy. Maybe put it towards some cooking classes. Really commit to this new domestic side of yours. As Marcus walked away laughing, Trent risked a glance at Reese. Her jaw was set, shoulders tight, and that familiar wall was back in her eyes, the one he'd spent weeks carefully trying to break down. The progress they'd made over the past few weeks seemed to evaporate in an instant, leaving behind a chill that had nothing to do with the concession stand's air conditioning. Reese? We're running low on hot dogs, she cut him off, turning away so quickly her braid whipped through the air. I need to check the storage room. Trent watched her retreat, frustration building in his chest like a football play gone wrong. He waited a few minutes, made sure the line was clear, then followed her into the storage room. She was counting boxes with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for defusing bombs, deliberately not looking at him. Okay, what gives? He crossed his arms, blocking the doorway, and trying to ignore how the small space made him acutely aware of her presence. Every time we take one step forward, something sends you 2 steps back. I'm working, Trent. She still wouldn't meet his eyes, focusing instead on a box of paper napkins like it held the secrets of the universe. And this is a small space. Yeah, it is. Perfect for having an honest conversation that you can't run away from. He softened his voice, fighting the urge to reach out and touch her. What's really bothering you? The teasing? Because I couldn't care less what Marcus or anyone else thinks. Reese finally looked at him, her green eyes sharp with hurt that made his stomach clench. You think that's what this is about? Your reputation isn't just teasing, Trent. It's a warning label. A warning label? He stepped closer, careful to give her space but needing her to see his sincerity. The fluorescent lights cast shadows across her face, highlighting the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. Based on what? Gossip? Things that happened years ago? Based on experience. Her voice cracked slightly, the sound hitting him harder than any tackle he'd ever taken. Do you know what it's like to explain to your 6-year-old why Daddy doesn't live with you anymore? To watch her face every time he cancels another weekend visit because his new girlfriend planned a trip? The pain in her voice hit him like a physical blow, making him wish he could hunt down her ex and introduce him to a few choice football moves. Reese, He was charming too, she continued, wrapping her arms around herself in a gesture that made him ache to pull her close. Great with kids. Everyone loved him. Right up until he decided our family wasn't exciting enough anymore. Trent's chest ached with a pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. He wanted to reach for her to promise he was different, but he knew those words would ring hollow right now. Instead, he leaned against a shelf, giving her the space to get it all out, while silently vowing to prove himself with actions rather than empty promises. I'm not him, he said quietly. And yeah, I've made mistakes. I've dated around, had my fun. But I've never made promises I couldn't keep, especially not to a kid. She looked up at him, searching his face. The women at the games tell stories, Trent. About promises you did make. What? He straightened, genuine confusion mixing with hurt. I've never. Mommy? Lily's voice called from the doorway. Are you okay? They both turned to find her standing there, worry creasing her small forehead. Trent watched as Reese instantly transformed, her face softening into a reassuring smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just doing inventory with Trent. Can I help? Lily bounced on her toes. I'm really good at counting now. Ms. Peterson says I'm the best in class at math. The tension in the room dissipated as Lily's enthusiasm filled the space. Trent couldn't help but smile, even as his heart still ached from Reese's words. Actually, he said, crouching down to Lily's level, I could really use your help with something more important. See, your mom's been working really hard, and I think she deserves a break. What if you and I handled the register for a bit, while she takes 5 minutes to herself? Lily's face lit up. Can I wear your cap? The one with the shark's logo? Lily, that's not necessary, Reese started, but Trent was already removing his cap and placing it carefully on Lily's head. It was way too big, slipping down over her eyes until she pushed it back, beaming. See? Perfect fit. Trent adjusted the cap slightly. Now you're officially part of the shark bite crew. Mom, look. Lily struck a pose, making both adults laugh despite the lingering tension. Reese's eyes met Trent's over her daughter's head, and something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of understanding. He held her gaze, trying to convey everything he couldn't say with Lily present, that he understood her fears, that he wasn't asking for blind faith, just a chance to prove himself through actions rather than words. 5 minutes, Reese said finally, her voice soft. But only because you're wearing the official uniform now, Lily Bug. Trent watched as Lily grabbed her mother's hand, squeezing it before letting go. Don't worry, Mom. Trent's teaching me to be brave, remember? I got this. The simple statement, delivered with such innocent confidence, seemed to hit Reese hard. She blinked rapidly, then leaned down to kiss Lily's forehead. Yeah, she whispered, glancing at Trent. I'm starting to see that. Trent couldn't help grinning, as Lily spread her science project materials across the counter of the shark bite shack. The third quarter had just started, and the usual rush had died down enough for them to tackle her solar system diorama. He'd noticed her working on it between customers earlier, her small face scrunched in concentration. So Neptune goes way out here? Lily held up a blue-painted styrofoam ball, waiting for his confirmation. That's right, kiddo. He helped her measure the distance with a ruler. It's the last planet in our solar system now that Pluto got demoted. Poor Pluto, Lily sighed, carefully gluing Neptune in place. Mom says sometimes life isn't fair, but we have to make the best of it anyway. Something warm spread through Trent's chest. Your mom's pretty smart. She is, Lily agreed, reaching for more glue. But sometimes she's too careful. Like when Sarah from my class invited me to her birthday party, and Mom worried about leaving me there without her. Trent paused in his task of holding the base steady. Did you end up going? Yeah, after you started teaching me those confidence tricks. Lily beamed up at him. I told Mom I could handle it, just like you said. And I made 3 new friends. That's my girl. He high-fived her, his heart swelling at how naturally the words came out. Speaking of confidence tricks, how's that power pose working out? Watch. Lily jumped down from her stool and struck the pose he taught her, feet planted firmly, hands on hips, chin up. I did it before my math test yesterday, and got an A. Lily Callahan, future valedictorian, he declared, making her giggle. What's going on here? A familiar voice asked, and Trent looked up to find Tank Jackson and a couple other teammates approaching the stand. Science project, Trent explained, gesturing to the half-finished diorama. Lily's teaching me about the solar system. Tank leaned over the counter, examining their work with exaggerated seriousness. Looking good, Miss Lily. Though I think Mars could use a little more red. You think so? Lily's eyes widened. Trent, can we fix it? Of course. He was already reaching for the paint. Tank knows his stuff, he's got a degree in astronomy. Really? Lily gasped. Tank winked. Nah, I just watch a lot of Star Trek. But seriously, Walker, it's cool seeing you like this. Who knew you had a knack for arts and crafts? He's really good, Lily defended him proudly. He even helped me make friendship bracelets last week. A few fans waiting in line chuckled warmly at this, and Trent felt his ears heat up. But it was worth any embarrassment to see Lily's proud smile. You've changed, man, Jason Rivera commented, joining them. In a good way. The kids at my daughter's school still talk about that confidence workshop you did. Trent caught movement from the corner of his eye. Reese had emerged from the storage room, pretending to organize supplies while clearly listening. It's not really change, Trent said carefully, aware of his audience. More like finally being myself instead of what everyone expected me to be. He felt Reese's eyes on him, but kept his focus on helping Lily add another coat of red to Mars. The quiet moment was interrupted by a customer asking for nachos, and they fell back into their routine, though something felt different now. Lighter. As the fourth quarter approached, Lily packed up her project and the crowd started filtering back to their seats. Trent found himself alone with Reese for the first time since their storage room conversation. "That was good of you," she said softly, nodding toward Lily's carefully packed diorama. "Helping her with that." Trent shrugged, wiping down the counter. "It's fun, actually. Reminds me of doing projects with my little sister after my parents split up." He hadn't meant to bring that up, but something in Reese's expression made him continue. "Dad left when I was 12. Classic midlife crisis, sports car, younger girlfriend, the works. Mom, she kind of fell apart for a while. I ended up being the stable one for my sister." He smiled wryly. "Probably why I avoided stability myself for so long. Scared of turning into either of them, I guess." Reese leaned against the counter, her guard lowering slightly. "That must have been hard." "It was. But you know what?" He turned to face her fully. "It taught me exactly what I don't want to be. When I care about someone, especially a kid, I'm all in. No half measures, no empty promises." "Trent." She crossed her arms, but it seemed more protective than defensive. "I appreciate you telling me this. And I see how good you are with Lily, I do. But you're still scared," he finished gently. "I get it, Reese. And I'm not asking you to trust me completely right now. Just maybe trust what you see, not what you've heard." She was quiet for a long moment, studying him. Finally, she nodded. "I'm trying. It's just that Lily's already so attached to you, and if this goes wrong—" "It won't," he interrupted, then caught himself. "Sorry, I know promises don't mean much right now. How about this? I'll keep showing up, keep proving it through actions. No pressure, no expectations. Just me being here, helping however I can. And if I need space," she challenged. "Then I'll respect that," he said simply. "But I'm not walking away unless you tell me to. I care about both of you too much for that." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Reese's expression softened, and for a moment Trent thought she might say something more. But then the crowd roared touchdown for the Sharks, and the moment passed. "I should check on Lily," she said, but her voice was gentle. "Thank you, though, for being honest about your past." As she walked away, Trent watched her go, his determination growing stronger. He'd meant every word. He would keep showing up, keep proving himself worthy of their trust. Because somewhere between fixing soda machines and making friendship bracelets, Reese and Lily Callahan had become the most important people in his world. And Trent Walker didn't give up on what mattered. Not anymore. Chapter 5: When Walls Break. Reese was elbow-deep in soapy water, scrubbing dishes from lunch when Lily burst through the front door, her backpack bouncing against her back as she raced into the kitchen. "Mom? Guess what?" Lily's face was flushed with excitement, her green eyes sparkling. Reese dried her hands on a dish towel. "What's got you so worked up, sweetie? Remembered those girls who were being mean?" Lily dropped her backpack by the counter. "Well, today at recess, I did what Trent taught me. I stood up straight, looked them right in the eyes, and told them I wasn't going to let them make me feel bad anymore." Pride and relief flooded through Reese's chest. "And what happened?" "They just stopped." Lily twirled around the kitchen. "And then Madison asked if I wanted to play jump rope with her group. She said I was really good at it." Reese pulled her daughter into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and playground sunshine. Her throat tightened as she thought about how much Lily had been hurting, and how Trent's simple intervention had made such a difference. "That's wonderful, baby." She kissed the top of Lily's head. "I'm so proud of you." "It's all because of Trent," Lily said, pulling back to look up at her mom. "He said bullies are just scared people trying to feel bigger, and that if I showed them I wasn't scared, they'd leave me alone." Reese's heart squeezed. She'd been so quick to judge Trent, so certain his reputation told the whole story. But watching him with Lily these past few weeks, seeing how naturally he connected with her daughter. "Hey," she said, making a snap decision. "What do you think about having Trent over for dinner tonight?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? Can we make spaghetti and meatballs? It's his favorite, he told me at the stand last week." "Sure," Reese laughed, already reaching for her phone. Her fingers hesitated over Trent's number. When had she memorized it? Before typing out a message. The response came almost immediately. "Dinner at your place? Are you feeling okay, Callahan?" She rolled her eyes, typing back. "Don't make me change my mind, Walker. Wouldn't dream of it. What time?" 3 hours later, Reese was putting the finishing touches on the garlic bread when the doorbell rang. Lily sprinted to answer it, before Reese could stop her. "Trent." Lily's excited squeal echoed through the house. "Mom's making your favorite." "Is she now?" Trent's deep voice carried a note of amusement that made Reese's cheeks warm. She heard his heavy footsteps following Lily's lighter ones into the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, holding a bottle of wine, and wearing a soft gray Henley that made his blue eyes look even more striking. "Something smells amazing." "It better," Reese said, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Lily insisted we make it perfect." "Did she tell you the good news?" he asked, setting the wine on the counter and leaning against it with casual grace. "She did." Reese met his eyes. "Thank you, Trent. What you did for her, it means a lot." His expression softened. "She's a great kid. She just needed to remember that." Dinner was a lively affair, with Lily hanging on Trent's every word as he told stories about his early days playing football. He had them both laughing with tales of mishaps and victories, somehow making even his mistakes sound endearing. "And then," he said, gesturing with his fork, "I realized I was running the wrong way with the ball." Lily giggled uncontrollably. "Did you score for the other team?" "Nah, my buddy tackled me before I could embarrass myself completely." Trent's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and Reese found herself staring more than once. After dinner, Lily begged for one more story before bed. Trent obliged but kept it short, seeming to sense Reese's motherly concerns about bedtime. When Lily finally trudged upstairs, Reese returned to find Trent had already started washing dishes. "You don't have to do that," she protested, reaching for the wine bottle he'd brought. "I want to." He glanced over his shoulder, soap suds clinging to his forearms. "Pour yourself a glass too?" She did, setting his next to the sink before leaning against the counter. The kitchen felt different with him in it, warmer somehow, more alive. "You're good with her," Reese said softly. "Natural." Trent finished the last plate before drying his hands and picking up his wine. "She makes it easy. Smart kid, big heart, just like her mom." Their usual sharp banter felt out of place in this quiet moment. Reese took a sip of wine, buying time as she tried to sort through the emotions tumbling through her chest. "I never thought I'd feel this comfortable," Trent said suddenly, his voice low. "With anyone, really? But especially not." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "The whole domestic scene, you know? Dinner, dishes, bedtime stories. It should feel strange, but it doesn't. Not with you two." Reese's heart thundered in her chest. She set her wine glass down, taking a step closer to him. His eyes darkened as she moved into his space, and she could smell his cologne, mixed with the lingering scent of garlic and tomatoes from dinner. Before she could talk herself out of it, Reese stretched up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate encounters she'd imagined late at night when she let her guard down. Trent stayed perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might spook her. Reality crashed back in, and Reese jerked away, her cheeks burning. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Reese?" His voice was rough, but he didn't move closer. "Don't apologize. Please." She wrapped her arms around herself, taking a step back. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Getting caught up, letting myself," she broke off, shaking her head. "I can't risk it." Not with Lily involved. Reese's heart hammered against her ribs as she stood there, the ghost of Trent's lips still tingling against hers. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too intimate. She'd spent weeks building walls, carefully maintaining distance, and now she'd gone and demolished them all with one impulsive kiss. "Hey," Trent said softly, setting his wineglass down. "Look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze, expecting to see triumph or that signature cockiness she'd grown used to. Instead, his blue eyes held nothing but warmth and understanding. "I'm not going to push you, Reese." He stayed where he was, giving her the space she desperately needed. "Whatever this is between us, it happens on your terms, at your pace. I'm not going anywhere." She let out a shaky breath. "That's what scares me. The possibility that you might mean that." "Why does that scare you?" "Because..." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, searching for the right words. "Because every time I let someone in, they prove they can't handle real life. The messy parts, the hard parts. Being a mom means I can't just think about myself anymore. And Lily, she's already been through so much with her father." Trent nodded slowly. "I get that. But Reese, I'm not asking you to trust me completely right now. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm worth trusting." "And what happens when football season ends?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "When you're not stuck helping at the concession stand anymore." A small smile tugged at his lips. "First of all, I was never stuck helping. I volunteer because I want to be there. With you. With Lily." He took a careful step closer. "And second, do you really think I'm showing up just for the hot dogs?" Despite herself, Reese felt a laugh bubble up. "They are pretty good hot dogs." "They're terrible, and we both know it." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "But the company makes up for it." The tension in her shoulders began to ease, just slightly. "I don't know how to do this, Trent. I don't know how to let someone in without feeling like I'm failing Lily somehow." "Being happy isn't failing her," he said quietly. "And for what it's worth, that little girl up there is the strongest, smartest kid I know. Just like her mom." Footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "I heard laughing." "Sorry, sweetie," Reese said, automatically stepping away from Trent. "Did we wake you?" Lily shook her head, her auburn pigtails swishing. "I was thirsty." She padded to the fridge, then paused, looking between them with sudden interest. "Were you guys having a moment?" "A moment?" Reese's voice came out higher than usual. "Yeah, like in those movies where the guy and girl are about to kiss, but then something interrupts them." Lily's green eyes sparkled with mischief. "Is Trent your boyfriend now?" Reese felt her face flame. "Lily?" "Because that would be really cool," Lily continued, seemingly oblivious to her mother's embarrassment. "Then he could come over for dinner all the time, and help with my homework and maybe even..." "How about that water?" Trent interrupted smoothly, though Reese could see him fighting back a grin. He grabbed a glass from the cabinet, when had he learned where they kept everything, and filled it from the tap. Lily accepted the water, but wasn't deterred. "Mom's face gets all soft when she looks at you sometimes. Like how Mrs. Peterson looks at Mr. Peterson when he brings her lunch at school." "Okay," Reese clapped her hands together. "Time for bed, young lady. For real this time." "But..." "No buts. March." Lily sighed dramatically, but started toward the stairs. She paused at the doorway. "Good night, Trent. Thanks for coming over." "Any time, kiddo." His voice was warm with affection that made Reese's chest ache. "Sweet dreams." Once Lily's footsteps faded, Reese buried her face in her hands. "I am so sorry about that." Trent's laugh was low and rich. "Don't be. She's observant, I'll give her that." "Too observant," Reese muttered, peeking through her fingers at him. "I don't know where she gets these ideas." "Really?" He raised an eyebrow. "Because I distinctly remember someone kissing me about 10 minutes ago." "Oh God." She dropped her hands, unable to help the laugh that escaped. This is not how I planned this evening going. No? He took a step closer, and this time she didn't back away. How did you plan it? I was going to thank you properly for helping Lily. Maybe start to admit that I might have judged you too quickly. She shook her head. I definitely wasn't planning on kissing you or having my daughter play matchmaker. Life's funny that way. His eyes softened as he looked at her. For what it's worth, I like this version better. The air between them felt charged again, but different this time. Less frightening somehow. More like the anticipation before a storm than the fear of one. I should probably go, Trent said, though he made no move toward the door. Early practice tomorrow. Reese nodded, walking him to the front door. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to end the evening. Thank you, she said finally. For everything with Lily. For being patient with me. For? She gestured vaguely between them. For being devastatingly handsome and charming? His familiar smirk was back, but there was something tender underneath it. She rolled her eyes. And there's the Trent Walker the first no. Hey. He caught her hand gently. I meant what I said. No pressure, no rushing. We'll figure this out together, okay? Reese looked down at their joined hands, at how naturally her smaller one fit in his. She thought about how easily he'd slipped into their lives, how much brighter everything seemed when he was around. How even her careful plans and protective instincts couldn't stop her heart from racing when he smiled at her. Okay, she whispered and squeezed his hand once before letting go. After he left, Reese stood at the kitchen window, watching his taillights disappear down the street. The house felt different somehow, not empty exactly, but full of possibility. Like the quiet after a first snow, when everything familiar looks new and magical. She touched her lips, remembering the kiss. It had been soft, sweet, nothing like the passionate encounters she'd imagined late at night when she let her guard down. But maybe that was better. Maybe sometimes the gentlest things were the strongest, like how a steady drip of water could carve through stone given enough time. For the first time in years, Reese allowed herself to wonder what it might be like to take a risk. Not just any risk, but this specific one, with this specific man who made her daughter laugh, and fixed broken soda machines, and looked at her like she hung the moon. Chapter 6, Rising Stakes. Trent wiped the sweat from his forehead as he headed toward the locker room after practice. The familiar chatter of his teammates filled the corridor, but a particular conversation caught his attention. Man, Walker's really changed his game plan, hasn't he? Jason's voice carried from around the corner. Never thought I'd see him playing house with the concession stand girl. Give it time, another player laughed. Remember that waitress from Murphy's last season? Or the yoga instructor? Trent's jaw clenched as the conversation drifted around the corner. He'd expected this kind of talk from his teammates, but hearing it still felt like a gut punch, the words twisting in his chest like a knife. These were his teammates, guys who should have his back through thick and thin, who'd celebrated victories and nursed losses together. Instead, they were treating his growing feelings for Reese like another conquest, another fleeting romance to add to his highlight reel of failed relationships. Later that afternoon, he stopped by the Shark Bite Shack to help with prep for the evening's game, his cleats squeaking against the freshly mopped floor. Reese barely looked up when he entered, her movements stiff and mechanical as she stocked the cooler with bottles of water and sports drinks. The tension in her shoulders spoke volumes. Need a hand? He asked, trying to catch her eye, desperate to see that spark of warmth that had been there just days ago. I've got it covered. Her voice was flat, clinical, holding none of the warmth from their dinner the other night. She'd pulled back, rebuilding those walls he'd worked so hard to scale, brick by painful brick. Reese? Actually, could you check if there are more napkins in the storage room? She cut him off, still not meeting his gaze, her hands never stopping their methodical work. Damn. The gossip had definitely reached her ears, probably twisted and exaggerated like a game of telephone. Trent's stomach churned as he headed to the storage room, remembering how it had felt when she'd kissed him, soft and sweet and absolutely perfect. That moment had been real, everything with Reese was real, from their playful banter to the way she looked at him when she thought he wouldn't notice. How could he make her see that? During practice the next day, Coach Caldwell pulled him aside, his weathered face set in familiar lines of concern. "Got a minute, Walker?" "Sure thing, Coach." Trent followed Big C to the sidelines, his cleats sinking into the grass, already sensing what was coming. "You're doing good work with the Callahans," Coach said, his expression serious as he crossed his arms. "But I'm hearing chatter. Your reputation's following you like a bad penny." "Coach, I swear it's different this time." "I believe you, son." Big C's weathered face softened, his eyes holding a paternal understanding that made Trent's chest tight. But perception matters. That woman and her little girl? They deserve better than being fodder for locker room gossip. Trent ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair, frustration building in his chest like a brewing storm. "What am I supposed to do? I can't change my past." "No, but you can show people who you are now." Coach clapped him on the shoulder, the gesture firm and grounding. "Actions speak louder than words, Walker. Always have." That night, Trent lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles above him, Coach's words echoing in his mind. Actions speak louder than words. An idea started forming. Something that would show Reese he was serious about being part of her and Lily's lives. Something that would prove to everyone that this wasn't just another game to him. The next game night was absolute chaos. The stands were packed with rowdy fans, and the line at the Shark Bite Shack stretched halfway down the walkway like a hungry snake. Trent watched from the field as Reese juggled orders, her face pinched with stress as she tried to keep up with the relentless demand, her auburn hair escaping from its practical braid. He didn't think twice. During halftime, still in his grass-stained uniform, he jogged over to the stand, ignoring the curious looks from fans and teammates alike. "Take 5, he told her, already stepping behind the counter and rolling up his sleeves. "I've got this." "Trent, you're supposed to be getting ready for the second half, I know. But you look like you need backup more than Coach needs his pregame speech." He flashed her a grin, the one that usually made her roll her eyes. "I've watched you enough to know how this works." To his surprise, she didn't argue. Maybe she was too tired, or maybe, just maybe, she was starting to trust him again, to see past the gossip and rumors to the man he was trying to be. For the next 15 minutes, Trent worked the stand like he'd been doing it for years, finding an unexpected rhythm in the controlled chaos. He remembered regular customers' orders, cracked jokes with the kids, and kept the line moving as smoothly as a well-executed play. His jersey was covered in mustard and ketchup by the time Coach started bellowing for him from the field, but seeing Reese's relieved smile, the first real one he'd gotten from her in days, made it worth every stain and every raised eyebrow from his teammates. "Walker's really stepped up his game," he heard a woman say as he prepared to head back to the field. "Remember when he used to be such a player? Now look at him, helping that single mom and her daughter like it's nothing." "I know. Did you see him teaching little Lily those confidence exercises last week? So sweet." Trent caught Reese's expression as she overheard the conversation. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or uncertainty. The hard edge of doubt in her eyes softened just a fraction. "You're going to be late," she said quietly, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice again. "Worth it." He winked at her before jogging back to the field, his heart lighter than it had been in days. The gossip wouldn't stop overnight. His reputation would take time to change. But as he took his position for the second half, Trent knew he was finally on the right path. Reese and Lily were worth fighting for, worth proving himself to, worth every mustard stain and sideways glance. And he was just getting started. Trent watched from across the parking lot as Lily bounced on her toes, demonstrating something to Reese outside the Shark Bite Shack. Even from this distance, he recognized the confidence-building stance he taught her last week. His chest warmed at how enthusiastically she showed off the moves, her pigtails swinging with each motion. But it was Reese's reaction that made him pause. Instead of her usual guarded expression, her face softened into something tender and open. She knelt down to Lily's level, and though Trent couldn't hear their conversation, he saw the way Reese pulled her daughter into a tight hug. The sight stirred something deep in his chest, reminding him of all the times his own mother had comforted him after tough games or hard days. "That's my girl," he murmured, unable to stop the smile spreading across his face. The words slipped out naturally, and for once he didn't try to analyze what that meant. The stadium lights cast long shadows as the crowd thinned out after the game, the autumn air growing crisp with nightfall. Trent helped break down the concession stand, stealing glances at Reese as she counted the register. Her hair had come loose from its practical braid, soft tendrils framing her face in the fluorescent light. The tension from earlier had eased somewhat, but she still maintained a careful distance, her movements precise and measured. "Hey," he said softly, approaching the counter, his cleats clicking against the concrete floor. "Can we talk?" Reese's shoulders stiffened slightly, her fingers pausing on the stack of bills. "I need to finish closing up." "I can wait." He meant it in more ways than one. "Trent." She sighed, finally meeting his eyes, and the weariness there made his heart ache. "It's been a long night." 5 minutes. "That's all I'm asking." He fought the urge to reach across the counter and tuck that loose strand of hair behind her ear. Before she could respond, Maggie appeared in the doorway, her keys jingling. "I can finish up here," she offered, giving Reese a pointed look. "You two should talk." But Reese was already shaking her head, gathering receipts with practiced efficiency. "Lily's waiting for me. Another time, okay?" Trent watched her gather her things, frustration building in his chest like a pre-game adrenaline rush with nowhere to go. He'd seen the way she looked at him during dinner the other night, felt the spark when she'd kissed him. The memory of her lips against his still burned. But every time they got close to something real, she pulled back like she'd touched a hot stove. "You're good with her, you know," Maggie said after Reese left, startling him from his thoughts. The sound of Reese's car starting up drifted through the open window. "Doesn't seem to matter much." He began stacking chairs with more force than necessary. "It matters more than you think." Maggie started wiping down the counter, the smell of disinfectant sharp in the air. "Reese hasn't let anyone get this close since the divorce. The fact that she invited you to dinner? That's huge." Trent leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair, still damp from his post-game shower. "Yeah, well, 1 step forward, 2 steps back." "She's scared," Maggie said simply. "But I've known Reese for years, and I've never seen her look at someone the way she looks at you when she thinks no one's watching." "Could have fooled me." The words came out more bitter than he intended. "Look, Reese is my best friend, and I've watched her shut down every possibility of happiness because she's terrified of getting hurt again." Maggie's voice grew serious, her cleaning motion slowing. "But you? You're different. You show up. You care about Lily. You're not just telling Reese who you are, you're showing her." "Not that it's making much difference," Trent muttered, though Maggie's words gave him hope, like a perfect pass just waiting to be caught. "Keep showing up," Maggie advised, tossing the rag into a bucket. "Reese notices everything, even if she pretends not to. And between you and me," she smiled knowingly, "she's starting to question whether pushing you away is worth missing out on something real." Trent straightened, his pulse quickening. "Yeah. I caught her Googling your stats the other day," Maggie said with a laugh. "Not just recent ones, she went back years. She's doing her research, trying to understand you better." "That sounds like Reese," Trent chuckled, warmth spreading through his chest at the thought of her caring enough to look him up. He could picture her, brow furrowed in concentration as she scrolled through his career highlights. "Just..." Maggie hesitated, keys clinking as she pulled them from her pocket. "Be patient with her, okay? She's worth the wait." "I know she is." And he did. Every moment with Reese and Lily felt right in a way nothing else had before, like finally finding the perfect rhythm on the field. The next morning, Trent spotted Reese and Lily at the local coffee shop, the early sunlight catching the auburn in their matching hair. He almost walked past, giving her space when she asked for it was important, but then Lily saw him through the window and waved enthusiastically, her whole face lighting up like game day fireworks. Well, he couldn't ignore that. "Look, Mom," Lily exclaimed as he entered. "It's Trent. Can he sit with us?" Please? Reese's expression was unreadable, but she nodded. If he wants to. Always want to spend time with my favorite girls, Trent said, sliding into the booth beside Lily. He caught Reese's slight eye roll, but noticed she was fighting a smile. Show him what you did at school yesterday. Lily tugged on his sleeve. The thing you taught me about standing up straight and using my brave voice? Someone was making fun of my science project, Lily explained, her voice proud rather than upset. But I remembered what you said about being confident, so I told them that their opinion didn't change how cool my project was. Trent's chest swelled with pride. That's exactly right. How'd it go? They actually asked if they could work with me next time. Lily beamed. Mom cried when I told her. I did not cry, Reese protested, but her eyes were soft as she looked at her daughter. I just had something in my eye. When Lily excused herself to use the bathroom, silence fell between them. Trent watched Reese trace the rim of her coffee cup, clearly lost in thought. Thank you, she said finally, so quietly he almost missed it. For helping her. For? She took a deep breath. For being consistent. Reese? No, let me finish. She met his eyes, and for once, she didn't look away. I know I've been difficult. And I know you're probably getting tired of proving yourself over and over. I'm not, he said firmly. I'll keep proving it as long as it takes. Something flickered in her expression, hope maybe, or fear. Or both. Why? Because you're worth it. Both of you are worth it. He leaned forward, keeping his voice low and sincere. I know my reputation makes it hard to trust me. I know I've given you every reason to doubt. But Reese, I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you and Lily. She swallowed hard, and for a moment Trent thought she might actually let her guard down. But then Lily bounded back to the table, and the moment passed. We should go, Reese said, gathering her things. But she paused before standing. There's a carnival coming to town next weekend. Lily's been begging to go. Trent's heart skipped. Was she? Maybe, she continued, not quite meeting his eyes, if you're not busy you'd like to join us? It wasn't quite an invitation for a deep conversation, but it was something. A test maybe, or an olive branch. Either way, Trent wasn't about to waste it. I'd love to, he said simply, watching as relief and anxiety warred on her face. As they left the coffee shop, Trent caught Reese looking back at him, her expression thoughtful. Maybe Maggie was right. Maybe Reese was finally ready to take a chance on something real. And Trent would be damned if he didn't prove himself worthy of that chance. Chapter 7, Falling Apart. Reese stared at the foam heart floating atop her latte, wondering when Maggie had gotten so good at reading her moods. The morning sun filtered through Seaside Sip's large windows, casting a warm glow across the weathered wood table between them. The cafe was quiet this early, just the way she liked it, perfect for drowning in her thoughts about a certain linebacker who'd been occupying far too much of her mental space lately. You're doing that thing again, Maggie said, sliding into the booth across from her. That thing where you overthink everything until it becomes this huge, impossible mountain. Reese traced the rim of her mug with her finger. I'm not overthinking. I'm being cautious. There's a difference. Honey, there's cautious, and then there's whatever emotional fortress you're building around yourself and Lily. Maggie's voice was gentle but firm. Trent's not Mark. The name of her ex-husband hit like a punch to the gut. No, he's not. Mark at least pretended to be reliable before showing his true colors. Trent's reputation preceded him. His reputation, Maggie echoed, raising an eyebrow. You mean the gossip from people who don't actually know him? The same guy who's been showing up consistently for weeks, helping at the stand, mentoring Lily? Reese shifted uncomfortably in her seat. That's exactly what worries me. He's so good with her. She's already attached, and if he... She broke off, the words sticking in her throat. If he what? Proves everyone wrong? Shows you he's actually a decent guy who cares about both of you? If he leaves, Reese whispered, finally voicing her biggest fear. Mark didn't just break my heart when he cheated. He broke Lily's too. She was 6, Maggie. 6 years old, asking me why Daddy didn't want to live with us anymore. Her voice cracked. I can't put her through that again. Maggie reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Sweetie, you can't protect her from everything. And maybe, just maybe, by trying so hard to shield her from potential hurt, you're actually keeping her and yourself from something wonderful. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. You're just making it complicated because you're scared. The truth in those words stung. Reese pulled her hand back, wrapping both around her cooling latte. Of course I'm scared. Being a single mom means every decision I make affects Lily. One wrong choice and what? The world ends. Honey, that little girl is resilient. And from what I've seen, she's got better judgment than you right now. Before Reese could respond, her phone buzzed. Time to head to the stadium for game prep. She stood, gathering her things. I need to go. Running away from this conversation doesn't make it less true, Maggie called after her. The afternoon rush at the Shark Bite Shack kept Reese busy enough to almost forget about her conversation with Maggie. Almost. But then Trent appeared, his practice jersey slightly damp with sweat, that infuriatingly genuine smile on his face. Need a hand? He asked, already reaching for an apron. We're fine, Reese said quickly, perhaps too quickly. I've got it under control. He paused, something flickering across his face, hurt maybe, or frustration. Reese? The nachos need restocking, she cut him off, keeping her tone professional. And the ice machine's running low. Trent stayed where he was, his blue eyes studying her face. You know, some people might think you're trying to avoid having a real conversation with me. I'm working, she said flatly. This isn't the time for personal conversations. When is? The question was soft but direct. Because lately, it seems like you've got walls up higher than the stadium. A customer approached the counter, and Reese seized the opportunity to step away. When she returned, Trent was still there, loading the nacho warmer with practiced ease. You don't have to do that, she said. I know. He glanced at her. I want to. Just like I want to be here, with you and Lily. You both matter to me. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. Trent. You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. Just think about it, okay? He finished with the nachos and hung up his apron, leaving Reese to wrestle with thoughts she'd been trying to avoid. That night, after a quiet dinner where Lily seemed unusually contemplative, Reese found a folded piece of paper on her pillow. Her daughter's careful handwriting filled the page with colored markers. Dear Mom, I know you worry a lot about me. But I'm happy when Trent's around. He makes you smile more too. Remember when he helped me stand up to Jenny at school? He said sometimes the bravest thing we can do is give people a chance to show us who they really are. I think maybe you should try being brave too. Love, Lily. P.S. He tells really good jokes, and I like when he helps at the stand. Can he stay? Reese sank onto her bed, the note trembling in her hands. Leave it to her 8-year-old to cut straight through her defenses with the kind of wisdom that only comes from a child's pure perspective. She thought about Trent's consistent presence over the past weeks, the way he never pushed but never gave up either. The genuine joy in his eyes when Lily mastered a new confidence-building technique. The quiet moments when he thought no one was watching, where his playboy reputation seemed like nothing more than a shadow of someone he used to be. Maybe Maggie was right. Maybe she was letting fear make her decisions. And maybe, just maybe, her daughter was braver than she was. Reese knew something was wrong the moment she flipped the fryer switch. Instead of the usual gentle hum, it made a sickening grinding noise before falling silent. She jabbed at the power button again, her heart rate climbing as nothing happened. No, 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 she muttered, checking the connections. The line of customers at the Shark Bite Shack was growing, and she could feel their impatient stares burning into her back. Not now. Lily looked up from her homework at the counter. Is it broken, Mom? Just being temperamental. Reese forced a smile, though panic was already setting in. Half her menu items required the fryer, and the game hadn't even started yet. She dealt with equipment issues before, but not during what was supposed to be their busiest night of the season. "Hey, everything okay?" The familiar voice made her shoulders tense. Of course Trent would show up now, when everything was falling apart. "Fine," she said curtly, not turning around. "Just a minor technical issue." "The fryer's broken," Lily announced helpfully. "And Mom's doing that thing where she pretends everything's okay, when it's not." Reese shot her daughter a look, but Lily just shrugged, returning to her math problems. "Let me take a look," Trent offered, already moving behind the counter. He was dressed for the game, his jersey crisp and ready, but he didn't hesitate to kneel beside the fryer. "You should be warming up," Reese protested. "The game starts in an hour." "I've got time." He examined the machine with focused attention that surprised her. "Besides, can't let my favorite concession stand manager drown in hungry fans, can I?" The playful comment hit a nerve. "I can handle it myself. I've been managing just fine without." A loud pop from the fryer cut her off, followed by an alarming smell of burning plastic. "Without what?" Trent asked, his voice carefully neutral as he disconnected the power. "Without help? Or without me specifically?" Reese ignored the question, addressing the growing line instead. "I apologize for the delay, folks. We're experiencing technical difficulties with our fryer. All other menu items are available." A chorus of disappointed groans met her announcement. She could already see the night's profits taking a hit. "I think I know what's wrong," Trent said, pulling out his phone. "Give me 5 minutes." Before she could object, he was making a call. "Hey, Joey?" "Yeah, it's Trent. Listen, remember that fryer issue you had at your restaurant last month? Mind walking me through the fix?" Reese watched, torn between gratitude and frustration, as Trent listened intently to whatever instructions he was receiving. His hands moved confidently as he worked, and 10 minutes later the fryer hummed to life. "There," he said, standing and wiping his hands on a towel. "Should hold until you can get a proper maintenance check, but you're good for tonight." The waiting customers cheered, and Lily gave him a high five. Reese muttered a quiet "thank you" before throwing herself into work, using the rush of orders to avoid any further conversation. But she felt Trent's presence throughout the game, even when he was on the field. He'd glance at the stand between plays, and twice during breaks he stopped by to check if she needed anything. Each time she gave him short professional responses, ignoring the hurt that flickered across his face. After the final whistle, long after the crowds had thinned and Lily had fallen asleep on her homework, Trent returned. He was still in his uniform, though he'd removed his helmet and pads. His hair was damp with sweat, and there was a smudge of dirt on his jaw that made him look oddly vulnerable. "We need to talk," he said quietly, helping her stack chairs without being asked. "I'm closing up." "Yeah, I can see that. Doesn't change the fact that we need to talk." Reese focused on wiping down the counter, her movements sharp and aggressive. "About what?" "About why you're suddenly treating me like I'm radioactive." He moved closer, forcing her to look at him. "What changed, Reese?" "Because I thought we were getting somewhere, and then suddenly you're building walls again." "Nothing changed. I just realized some things needed to stay professional." "Professional?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call pushing away someone who cares about you and your daughter?" The words hit too close to home, and Reese felt her carefully constructed defenses crack. "Caring isn't enough." The words burst out louder than she intended, and she glanced quickly at Lily, relieved to see her still sleeping. When she continued, her voice was lower but no less intense. "Caring is easy, Trent. Staying is hard. Being reliable is hard. And you?" "I what?" he challenged when she faltered. "Have a reputation? Haven't I shown you that's not who I am anymore? People don't change that easily." "No, they don't. But they do change." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've been here, Reese. Every game, every practice. I've helped with the stand, supported Lily, tried to show you that I'm serious about this, about us. But you're so determined to see me as unreliable that you're not actually seeing me at all. I see you just fine, she snapped, but her voice wavered. I see someone who's never had to worry about consequences, who can walk away whenever things get tough. Is that really what you think? Trent's voice was quiet now, hurt. That I'd walk away from you? From Lily? Everyone does, eventually. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way she hadn't meant to be. I'm not everyone. He stepped closer, and Reese had to force herself not to back away. And I'm not Mark. The sound of her ex-husband's name made her flinch. Don't? No, we need to talk about this. You're punishing me for his mistakes, and that's not fair to either of us. Life isn't fair, Reese said, hating how defensive she sounded. And I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting my daughter. From what? From having someone else in her corner? From seeing what a healthy relationship looks like? Trent's eyes were intense, searching her face. Or are you really protecting yourself? The question hit too close to home, and Reese felt tears threatening. She turned away, busying herself with the cash register. You should go. It's late, and I need to close up. She heard him sigh heavily. Fine. I'll go. But this conversation isn't over, Reese. Yes, it is. No, he said firmly. It's not. Because unlike what you seem to think, I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you look me in the eye and tell me that's what you really want. She kept her back turned, unable to meet his gaze. After a moment, she heard his footsteps retreating, followed by the soft sound of him dropping a kiss on Lily's head. Sweet dreams, kiddo, he whispered, and something in Reese's chest twisted painfully. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, and Reese finally let out the breath she'd been holding. She looked at Lily, peaceful in sleep, and thought about her daughter's note from the other night. About being brave. But brave felt a lot like stupid when your heart was on the line. Redemption. Trent paced the sidelines of the Sharks field, checking his phone for the 100th time. The community event was set to start in 2 hours, and he needed everything to be perfect. Volunteers bustled around, setting up tables and hanging banners while the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass. Looking good, Walker, Big C called out, hauling a stack of chairs. Though I gotta say, never thought I'd see you organizing a family fun day. Yeah, well, people change. Trent adjusted the Sharks Community Day banner, making sure it hung straight. He'd spent the past week coordinating with local businesses, arranging activities, and most importantly, ensuring the Shark Bite Shack would be the centerpiece of the food offerings. After the fryer incident, he knew Reese needed a win, even if she wasn't speaking to him right now. His stomach twisted as he spotted her auburn hair across the field. Reese was directing volunteers at her temporary setup, her movements sharp and focused, reminding him of a general commanding troops. She hadn't acknowledged him since he'd arrived, but at least she'd shown up. That had to count for something, even if the silence between them felt like a physical weight on his shoulders. Uncle Trent. Lily's voice cut through his thoughts as she barreled toward him, pigtails flying, her Sharks t-shirt, the one he'd given her last month, fluttering in the breeze. He caught her easily, swinging her up into a hug that felt more natural than he'd ever expected, the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and sunshine wrapping around him. Hey, Squirt. Ready to help me set up the obstacle course? Yeah. Mom said I could help as long as I stayed where she could see me. Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement, her small hands gripping his shoulders. Is it true there's gonna be a dunk tank? Sure is. Trent set her down, grinning and ruffling her hair. Coach Carson volunteered. Think you can hit the target? Definitely. Lily bounced on her toes, practically vibrating with energy. Mom's been teaching me to throw. She says I have a better arm than some of the players. Oh yeah? Trent raised an eyebrow, catching Reese watching them from across the field, her expression a mix of worry and something softer he couldn't quite read. Your mom might be right about that. He knelt down to Lily's level, his voice softening as his knee pressed into the damp grass. Listen, Squirt, I wanted to tell you something important. This event today? It's partly because of you and your mom. You two have become really special to me, and I wanted to do something nice for the whole community, but especially for you guys. Lily's face lit up like a stadium floodlight. Really? Even though Mom's been kind of mean to you lately? Trent chuckled, his heart squeezing at her concerned expression. Your mom's not mean. She's just careful. And that's okay. Sometimes the best people are worth being patient for. Like her mother, he thought, remembering every small smile and shared moment that had led him here. A commotion near the entrance caught his attention. A group of kids from Lily's school had arrived, including the ones who'd given her trouble before. Trent felt Lily tense beside him, her earlier confidence wavering as she unconsciously stepped closer to his side. Hey, he said quietly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, remember what we practiced? Lily nodded, squaring her small shoulders like a miniature linebacker. Stand tall, speak clearly, and know my worth. That's my girl. Trent watched as 3 of Lily's former tormentors approached, their eyes darting between him and Lily, their designer sneakers scuffing the grass. Hi Lily, one of the girls said, her voice uncertain. Cool event. Trent stayed quiet, letting Lily handle it. She took a deep breath, just like they'd practiced during their secret coaching sessions behind the shark bite shack. Thanks, Lily replied, her voice steady and clear as a bell. My friend Trent helped organize it. He plays for the Sharks. She gestured proudly toward him, and Trent gave a casual wave, trying to project the easy confidence he usually saved for game day. The kid's eyes widened, starstruck. Really? That's so cool. The same girl who'd spoken first shuffled her feet, twisting the hem of her shirt. Could we maybe help with the obstacle course too? Trent watched Lily consider this, seeing the moment she chose kindness over fear, just like they'd talked about. Her chin lifted slightly as she made her decision. Sure, she said. I know where everything goes. As Lily led the small group toward the equipment, Trent caught Reese watching the interaction, her hand pressed to her mouth. Even from this distance, he could see the mix of pride and something else, maybe regret, in her expression. The sight made his chest ache with the need to bridge the gap between them. The next hour flew by as they finished setting up, the morning dew burning off under the strengthening sun. The field transformed into a carnival-like atmosphere, with game stations, food areas, and music filling the space. Tank had even brought his telescope for impromptu astronomy lessons. Trent grabbed the microphone, his heart pounding as he prepared to address the growing crowd, hoping somewhere in his welcome speech he'd find the words to reach not just the community, but the one person whose opinion mattered most. Hey everyone! Welcome to the First Sharks Community Day. His voice carried across the field as families gathered around. Before we kick things off, I want to thank someone special. Reese Callahan, could you come up here for a minute? He saw her freeze behind the concession counter, her eyes wide with surprise. After a moment's hesitation, she made her way to the front, her cheeks flushing. Some of you might know Reese as the person who keeps us fed during games, but she's more than that. She's the heart of the Sharks community. Trent's voice softened as he met her eyes. She works harder than anyone I know to make game days special, to make everyone feel welcome, and to show up every single day with a smile, even when certain linebackers are being particularly annoying. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Reese's lips twitched, fighting a smile. So today, part of the proceeds from every food item sold will go toward upgrading the Shark Bite Shack's equipment. Because this community isn't just about football, it's about the people who make it feel like home. Trent cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how personal his words had become. And Reese? You and Lily, you make it feel like home. The crowd erupted in applause, but Trent barely heard it. He was too focused on the way Reese's eyes had filled with tears, on how she was looking at him like she was finally seeing him clearly. Trent's hands shook slightly as he stepped away from the microphone, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He'd laid it all out there, maybe too much, judging by the way Reese had disappeared into the crowd after his speech. He busied himself helping kids at the obstacle course, but his eyes kept scanning the field for her auburn hair. "She's talking to Maggie by the snow cone stand," Tank said, appearing beside him with a knowing grin. "And before you ask, yes, I've been watching you mope around like a lost puppy for the past 20 minutes. "I don't mope," Trent protested, helping a young boy over the tire jumps. "I'm just giving her space." "Right?" Tank crossed his arms. "Because that's worked so well for you both so far." Before Trent could respond, he caught sight of Reese moving through the crowd toward him. His breath caught as she approached, her expression unreadable but somehow softer than before. Maggie stood a few yards behind her, giving him an encouraging thumbs up. "Hey," Reese said quietly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can we talk?" "Yeah, of course." Trent's heart hammered against his ribs as he turned to Tank. "Can you watch the obstacle course?" "Already on it." Tank winked, herding another group of excited kids toward the start line. They walked together toward a quieter corner of the field, where string lights were just beginning to twinkle in the early evening sky. The soft glow reminded Trent of their first real conversation at the Shark Bite Shack. He fought the urge to reach for her hand, instead shoving his own into his pockets to keep from doing something that might spook her. "That speech," Reese started, then paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Her auburn hair caught the light, making it look like burnished copper. "I didn't expect any of this, Trent." "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" His heart thundered in his chest as he waited for her answer, remembering all the times he'd wondered if he was fighting a losing battle. "Good. Definitely good." She met his eyes, and the vulnerability there made his chest ache. "Maggie reminded me of something important just now. She said I've been so focused on protecting Lily from getting hurt that I didn't realize I might be hurting her and myself by pushing away someone who actually cares." Trent took a deep breath, the familiar scent of grass and ocean air filling his lungs. "I should have addressed your concerns head-on instead of just trying to prove myself through actions. I get why you were worried about my reputation. Hell, I was worried about it too." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never quite broken. "But Reese, the minute I met you and Lily, something changed. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about being the person you both deserve." "I know," she whispered, and his heart skipped at the softness in her voice. The same voice that had once cut him down with sharp comebacks now held something tender that made his pulse race. "I've been watching you with Lily, seeing how you are with her. The way you helped her with the bullying, how you always make her feel important. That's not something you can fake." "No, it's not." Trent took a chance and stepped closer, drawn to her like a magnet. The warmth of her body called to him, making his fingers itch to pull her close. "I meant what I said up there. You and Lily, you've become everything to me. And I know that comes with real responsibility. I'm ready for that, more than ready. I want to be someone you both can count on, always." Reese's eyes glistened with tears, but she was smiling that smile that had first knocked him sideways months ago. "I think you already are." She reached up, her fingers ghosting along his jaw, sending electricity coursing through him. "I'm sorry I let my fears blind me to what was right in front of me. Because the truth is, Trent Walker, I'm falling in love with you." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment as her words sank in. Everything, the lights, the distant chatter, the sound of waves breaking against the shore, faded away until there was only Reese. Trent cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had spilled onto her cheeks. "I'm already there," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "Have been for a while now." When their lips finally met, it felt like coming home. Trent poured everything he couldn't say into the kiss. His promises, his devotion, his love. The sweet taste of her lips, and the way she melted against him, made his head spin. Reese's fingers curled into his shirt, as if to keep him close, though he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "You, Mom." "Gross." They broke apart, laughing, as Lily bounded toward them with Tank chasing after her, calling out apologies for letting her escape the obstacle course. Her pigtails bounced with each step, reminding Trent of the first time she'd asked him to braid her hair at the concession stand. "Sorry, Squirt," Trent chuckled as Lily crashed into him with a hug that nearly knocked him back a step. "Couldn't help myself." "It's okay," Lily declared, beaming up at him with those green eyes that matched her mother's. "You're my favorite shark anyway, even if you kiss my mom." Reese laughed, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "Oh, is that so? What about Tank?" "Tank's cool," Lily conceded, shooting an apologetic look at his teammate, "but Trent taught me how to be brave. Plus, he makes the best nachos at the Shark Bite." "Can't argue with that logic," Tank said, grinning and giving Trent a knowing wink. "Though I might have to challenge you to a nacho-making competition someday, Walker." "You're on," Trent replied, but his attention was already drifting back to Reese, who was looking at him with such warmth it made his heart swell. He'd never thought he'd find this sense of belonging, of family, on a small-town football field. As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Trent helped Reese and Lily pack up the concession stand, falling into an easy rhythm they'd perfected over countless game nights. The field was quieter now, string lights casting a gentle glow over the remnants of the day's festivities. When Reese's fingers laced through his, it felt natural, like they'd been doing this forever. Like they would keep doing it forever, if he had anything to say about it. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up on us." "Never," he promised, squeezing her hand. "Though I have to warn you, now that I can officially help at the Shark Bite, you might never get rid of me." "Is that a threat, or a promise?" Reese's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Definitely a promise." Trent pulled her closer, dropping a kiss on her temple. "I'm thinking permanent volunteer status, complete with terrible jokes and free nachos for life." "Mom?" Lily called from ahead of them, where she was attempting to carry far too many supplies. "Can Trent come over for movie night tomorrow? I want to show him my science project." Reese looked up at him, a soft smile playing at her lips. "What do you say, Walker? Ready for the full family experience?" "More than ready," he answered without hesitation, his heart full as they walked hand in hand through the quiet field, Lily's chatter floating back to them on the evening breeze. Chapter 9: Victory and Validation. Reese had always viewed football from behind the concession stand's counter, but tonight was different. The energy from the packed stadium thrummed through her as she stood on the sidelines, Lily bouncing excitedly beside her in her oversized jersey, Walker number 87 emblazoned proudly across the back. The custom jersey had been Lily's idea, and watching her daughter's face light up when it arrived had confirmed Reese made the right choice in letting Trent into their lives. "Mom, look. He's warming up." Lily tugged at Reese's sleeve, pointing toward the field where Trent was running drills with his teammates. His usual confident swagger was tempered by an intensity Reese hadn't seen before. This game meant everything to the Sharks. Their shot at the division title hung in the balance. The stadium lights caught Trent's blonde hair as he turned, scanning the crowd. When his eyes found them, his serious expression melted into that familiar grin that still made Reese's heart skip. He jogged over, his cleats kicking up bits of turf. "My two favorite fans," he said, reaching out to ruffle Lily's hair. "Nice jersey, kiddo. Do you like it?" Lily spun around, showing off the number. "Mom helped me order it special." Trent's gaze met Reese's, and she felt her cheeks warm. "It looks perfect on you," he said, though his eyes lingered on Reese. "Both of you being here, it means a lot." "We wouldn't miss it," Reese said softly. The words felt inadequate compared to everything building in her chest: pride, nervousness, and something deeper she was finally letting herself embrace. The first half was brutal. The opposing team seemed to have studied every Sharks play, and despite Trent's best efforts, they were down by 10 points at halftime. Reese could see the frustration in his shoulders as he headed toward the locker room. "Mom," Lily whispered, clutching something in her hand. "Can we go see Trent? I made him something." Reese hesitated, knowing the team needed their halftime strategy session, but Lily's earnest expression won her over. They made their way around the edge of the field, finding Trent just before he reached the tunnel. "Trent." "Wait," Lily called out. He turned, surprise flickering across his features before softening into a smile. Even covered in sweat and grass stains, he managed to look annoyingly handsome. Reese pushed that thought aside as he jogged over. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. "I made you this," Lily said, holding out her hand. In her palm sat a braided bracelet, blue and silver threads woven together with careful precision. "It's for luck. I learned how to make them at school, and the colors match the team." Trent crouched down to Lily's level, taking the bracelet with the kind of reverence usually reserved for precious gems. "This is exactly what I need," he said, sliding it onto his wrist. "Think it'll help us win?" "Obviously," Lily said with all the confidence of an 8-year-old. "Mom says you're the best player on the team." "Oh, does she now?" Trent's eyes sparkled as he glanced up at Reese, who felt her face flush. "I said you were one of the best," Reese corrected, though she couldn't help smiling. "Don't let it go to your head, Walker." Too late. He stood, adjusting the bracelet. "Having my 2 lucky charms here? The other team doesn't stand a chance." Coach Carson's voice boomed across the field, calling the team in. Trent looked torn, clearly not wanting to leave. "Go," Reese said, gathering her courage to reach out and squeeze his hand. "We'll be right here cheering you on." "Promise?" The word carried more weight than just this game, and they both knew it. "Promise." Reese meant it with every fiber of her being. "Now go show them what you've got." As Trent jogged away, Lily slipped her hand into Reese's. "He's gonna win," she said with absolute certainty. "Because we're his family now, right?" Reese watched Trent's retreating form, the bracelet a splash of color on his wrist, and felt something settle in her chest. "Yeah, baby," she whispered. "We are." The sound of cleats on concrete faded as Trent disappeared into the tunnel, but Reese could still feel the warmth of his hand in hers, the look in his eyes when Lily called them family. For the first time in years, she wasn't scared of what tomorrow might bring. She was exactly where she needed to be, standing on the sidelines with her daughter, cheering on the man who had somehow become essential to both their lives. "Come on," she said to Lily, "let's find our spot. We've got a game to watch." Reese could barely hear herself think over the thunderous roar of the crowd. Her heart pounded as she watched Trent line up for what could be the Sharks' final play. They were down by 4 points with less than a minute left on the clock, and the tension in the stadium was electric. Lily squeezed her hand so tight it almost hurt. "Come on, Trent," her daughter whispered, bouncing on her toes. The ball snapped. Reese held her breath as Trent broke through the defensive line, his movements fluid and purposeful. The quarterback's throw sailed high, too high she thought, but Trent leapt, stretching his body to its limit. Time seemed to slow as the ball spiraled toward his outstretched hands. The bracelet Lily made flashed blue and silver under the stadium lights as Trent secured the catch. He hit the ground running, dodging one defender, then another. The crowd's roar built to a deafening crescendo as he crossed into the end zone. Touchdown. The stadium erupted. Lily screamed, jumping up and down. "He did it. Mom, he did it." Reese found herself swept up in the moment, cheering just as loudly as everyone else. The scoreboard changed, putting the Sharks ahead by 3 points with 30 seconds left. When the defense held strong for those final moments, sealing their victory, the celebration exploded across the field. "Can we go down there?" Lily tugged at her arm, pointing to where players and fans were flooding onto the field. "Please, Mom." Reese hesitated for a split second before nodding. "Stay close to me," she said, but Lily was already pulling her toward the stairs. They made their way through the crowd, dodging celebrating fans and players hugging their families. Reese spotted Trent in the middle of it all, still wearing his helmet, surrounded by teammates slapping his back and shoulders. "Trent." Lily's voice somehow cut through the chaos. He turned, and even with his face partially hidden by his helmet, Reese could see his eyes light up. He broke away from his teammates, pulling off his helmet as he jogged toward them. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat, his face flushed from the game, but his smile was radiant. Before Reese could process what was happening, she found herself moving forward. Their bodies collided in a fierce hug, his shoulder pads hard against her chest, but she didn't care. She breathed in the scent of grass and sweat and pure joy, feeling his arms tighten around her. You were amazing, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Couldn't let my lucky charms down, he murmured back, his breath warm against her ear. A small body crashed into their legs. That was the best catch ever, Lily exclaimed. Trent pulled back from Reese, his eyes dancing with mischief. You think that was good? How about this? In one smooth motion, he scooped Lily up and settled her on his shoulders. She squealed with delight, gripping his hair for balance. Look how tall I am, Mom. Lily called down, beaming with pride. Reese laughed, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. I see you, baby. Hold on tight. Always do, Lily replied, and something about the way she said it made Reese's eyes water. Coach Caldwell approached them, his usual gruff expression softened by victory. Hell of a game, Walker, he said, clapping Trent on the back. That's the kind of leadership we've been looking for, on and off the field. His knowing glance between Trent and Reese made her cheeks warm. Thanks, Coach, Trent said, one hand steadying Lily while the other found Reese's, intertwining their fingers. You keep playing like that, Big C continued, and we might need to discuss your future with the team. Assistant coach position could be opening up next season. Reese felt Trent's hand tighten around hers. She knew how much coaching meant to him, how he'd been looking for a way to stay connected to the game he loved. Something to think about, Big C said with a wink, before moving on to congratulate other players. The field was starting to clear, fans making their way to the parking lot while players gathered their gear. Lily was still perched on Trent's shoulders, chattering excitedly about every play she remembered from the game. And when you caught that ball, she demonstrated with her hands, nearly losing her balance. Oh there, kiddo, Trent laughed, steadying her. How about we get you back on solid ground? He lifted her down carefully, but instead of running off like she usually would, Lily wrapped her arms around his waist in a tight hug. I knew you'd win, she said with absolute conviction. Trent met Reese's eyes over Lily's head, and the emotion she saw there made her breath catch. This was what she'd been afraid of for so long, this feeling of completeness, of family. But standing there on the field, watching the two people she loved most in the world, she couldn't remember why she'd been scared at all. The stadium lights cast long shadows across the field, as the last of the crowd dispersed. Lily had moved on to examining Trent's grass-stained jersey, pointing out every mark like it was a badge of honor. Reese stepped closer, drawn into their orbit as naturally as breathing. You still wearing that lucky bracelet? She asked, reaching for his wrist. Haven't taken it off, he said softly. Don't plan to? The simple blue and silver threads had survived the game, though they were a bit dirty now. But somehow that made it better, like the bracelet had been part of the victory, just like they had been. Good, Reese said, her thumb tracing the braided pattern. Because I think we might need you to wear it for a while. Trent's eyes searched her face, understanding dawning in his expression. Yeah? Yeah, she breathed, and this time when he pulled her close, she didn't hold anything back. Chapter 10, A Future Together. The morning sun streamed through Seaside Sip's windows, casting a warm glow over their corner booth. Reese wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, savoring both the warmth and the rare quiet moment. Across from her, Trent was attempting to build a tower out of sugar packets, while Lily concentrated on drawing elaborate patterns in the foam of her hot chocolate. You know, Reese said, watching Trent's sugar packet architecture wobble precariously, for someone with such good hands on the field, you're terrible at this. He flashed her that devastating grin. Maybe I'm just distracted by the company. Smooth talker. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. The early morning light caught the silver threads in his hair, and her fingers itched to run through it. Mom, look. Lily held up her mug, showing off the intricate heart she'd drawn in the remaining foam. Maggie taught me how to do it yesterday. That's beautiful, baby. Reese shared a knowing look with Maggie behind the counter. The cafe owner had become Lily's unofficial art teacher during their morning visits, and Reese suspected the extra whipped cream that always appeared on Lily's drinks wasn't entirely accidental. Trent leaned forward, examining Lily's creation with exaggerated seriousness. That's professional level work right there. Speaking of which, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I might have something for our resident artist." Lily's eyes widened. "What is it?" "Well," he drawled, drawing out the moment in a way that made Lily bounce in her seat. "I happened to get my hands on some special tickets for the Sharks Fan Day next weekend. But they're only for serious fans who can draw hearts in hot chocolate foam." "I can." "I just did." Lily reached for the envelope, but Trent held it just out of reach. "I don't know." He pretended to consider. "What do you think, Reese? Is she ready for the VIP treatment?" Reese felt her heart swell watching them, the easy way they played off each other, the pure joy in Lily's expression. "I think she's more than ready." Trent handed over the envelope, and Lily tore into it with enthusiasm. "Behind-the-scenes tour," she squealed, reading the tickets. "And we get to meet all the players and, Mom, look! There's going to be face painting." "I see that, sweetheart." Reese caught Trent's eye over Lily's head. He'd mentioned wanting to do something special for Lily, but this was above and beyond. The tickets for these events were notoriously hard to get, even for players. As if reading her thoughts, he shrugged. "Called in a few favors. Turns out being the team's resident handyman at the concession stand comes with some perks." "Handyman?" Reese arched an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling your disaster with the soda machine now?" "Hey, I fixed it eventually. After spraying everyone within 10 feet with Diet Coke. It added excitement to the game. It added sticky floors to my stand." Lily giggled at their banter, still clutching the tickets. "Can I show these to Maggie?" At Reese's nod, she slid out of the booth and bounded toward the counter, where Maggie was already preparing to ooh and ah appropriately over the tickets. "Thank you," Reese said softly, watching her daughter animatedly describe the event to Maggie. "This means a lot to her. To both of us." Trent reached across the table, taking her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending little sparks up her arm. "I never thought I'd find this," he admitted. "Someone who calls me out on my BS, who makes me want to be better. A kid who makes me want to show up every day, who looks at me like I'm some kind of hero even when I'm just being myself." "Well," Reese squeezed his hand, "you didn't give me much choice. You just kept showing up, being annoyingly persistent with your charm and your helping hands and your way with my daughter." "Annoyingly persistent?" He pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "I prefer determinedly devoted. Is that what we're calling it now?" "Among other things." His voice dropped lower, more serious. "I love you both, you know that?" The words still made her breath catch, even though they'd said them before. "We love you too. Even if you are terrible at sugar packet architecture." His tower chose that moment to collapse, sending packets scattering across the table. They both laughed, and Reese felt that familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was what happiness felt like. Simple moments, shared laughter, the knowledge that she didn't have to face anything alone anymore. "Mom, Trent." Lily slid back into the booth, practically vibrating with excitement. "When can we go to another game together? Like as a team?" "A team, huh?" Trent grinned at her. "I like the sound of that." "Yeah. Because you're a player, and Mom runs the best stand ever, and I'm the official taste tester for all the new snacks." "Is that your official title now?" Reese asked, amused. "Maggie says every business needs quality control." Lily nodded seriously. "So when can we go?" "The next home game is Saturday, and I already finished all my homework for next week, and I promised to clean my room." "Sounds like someone's been planning this," Trent winked at Reese. "She gets that from her mother," he added. "Always thinking 3 steps ahead." Reese kicked him lightly under the table. "Better than not thinking at all, mister. Let's fix the soda machine without reading the manual." That was one time. One very sticky time. Lily looked between them, her expression bright with affection. "So is that a yes to Saturday?" Reese pretended to consider it, though they all knew what her answer would be. How could she say no to those hopeful faces? "Well, I suppose someone needs to make sure the concession stand runs smoothly." Yes. Lily pumped her fist in the air, nearly knocking over her hot chocolate. Can I wear my jersey? And bring my sign? And maybe we could get there early so I can watch warm-ups? Oh there, kiddo, Trent laughed. One thing at a time. But yes to all of the above, as long as your mom's okay with it. They both turned to Reese with identical pleading expressions, and she felt her heart melt all over again. This was her family now, a football player with a heart of gold, and a daughter who saw the best in everyone. It wasn't what she'd planned when she'd first moved to Ocean View, but it was better than anything she could have imagined. Yes to all of it, she said, and their matching grins made her laugh. But only if you both help me prep the stand before the game. Deal, they said in unison, then looked at each other in surprise before dissolving into giggles. The morning sun climbed higher, painting patterns on their table through the cafe windows. Around them, the usual morning crowd filtered in and out, but in their corner booth, time seemed to stand still. Reese watched as Trent helped Lily plan her game day sign, their heads bent together over a napkin as they sketched out ideas. This was what contentment felt like, she realized. Not the absence of chaos, because with these two there would always be some form of beautiful chaos, but the presence of love steady and sure as the tide. Trent watched Lily bounce ahead of them on the boardwalk, her pigtails swinging in the morning breeze. His heart swelled as she turned back to wave, reminding him of how quickly she'd worked her way into his life. The small velvet box in his pocket felt heavier with each step, but in the best possible way. She's practically glowing today, he said, squeezing Reese's hand. Must be all that sugar from the cafe. Reese laughed, the sound carrying over the crash of waves. Don't blame Maggie's cinnamon rolls. That's pure Lily energy. The morning sun caught the auburn highlights in Reese's hair, and Trent couldn't help but marvel at how different his life had become since that first day at the Shark Bite Shack. He'd walked in expecting to charm his way through another conversation, and instead, he'd found his whole world shifting on its axis. What? Reese asked, catching his stare. Just thinking about how wrong you were about me. He grinned, earning an eye roll that had long since lost its edge. Careful, Walker. I can still change my mind about you. No, you can't. He pulled her closer, their shoulders bumping as they walked. You're stuck with me now. They reached the stretch of beach where he'd first taught Lily his confidence-building exercises. The memory of that day, Reese watching from the sidelines, her wall starting to crack, made his next move feel even more right. Hey Lily, he called out. Come here a second, kiddo. Lily spun around, racing back to them with sand flying from her shoes. What's up? Trent knelt down to her level, a move that had become second nature. Remember that secret mission we talked about? Lily's eyes lit up, and she nodded enthusiastically. Reese crossed her arms, eyebrow raised in that way that still made his heart skip. What secret mission? She asked. Well, Trent began, reaching into his pocket. Lily and I had a very important conversation last week about teams. About teams? Reese's voice softened with confusion. Lily bounced on her toes. About our team. You, me, and Trent. Trent pulled out the box, and Reese's hand flew to her mouth. See, Lily helped me understand something crucial about teams. He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring that caught the morning light. The best ones make it official. Trent. Reese's voice wavered. I know we didn't start out as teammates. You thought I was just another player who couldn't be trusted with your heart, or Lily's. He glanced at Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. But somewhere between broken soda machines and football practices, between concession stand chaos and quiet moments like this, we became something more. Reese's eyes glistened as he continued, You and Lily aren't just the best part of my day anymore, you're my home team. My family. And I want to make it official, if you'll have me. He took a breath, his heart pounding harder than before any game. Reese Callahan, will you marry me? Lily clutched her hands together, watching her mother with wide eyes. Reese's tears spilled over as she nodded, words seemingly stuck in her throat. Yes? Trent prompted, his own voice rough with emotion. Yes, she managed, pulling him to his feet. Yes, you impossible man. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands steadier than he'd expected. Before he could say another word, Lily crashed into both of them, wrapping her arms around their waists. "We're going to be a real family," she squealed. Trent lifted her up, settling her on his hip despite her growing too big for it. "We already were, Squirt. This just makes it extra official." Reese leaned into them, her head resting against his shoulder. "I can't believe you two planned this together." "Lily's very good at keeping secrets," Trent said proudly. "Unlike some of the guys on the team who nearly spoiled it twice." "Is that why Big C kept trying to distract me at yesterday's game?" "That man couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it." Trent laughed, remembering the linebacker's awkward attempts at casual conversation. A chorus of cheers erupted from further down the beach, and they turned to see several of the Sharks players and their families waving from the boardwalk. Maggie stood among them, phone raised to capture the moment. "You really did plan this," Reese said, shaking her head with a smile. "Hey, when you're part of a team, you've got backup." Trent set Lily down, watching her wave enthusiastically to their impromptu audience. "Can we go tell everyone up close?" Lily asked, practically dancing with excitement. "Reese, you there?" Trent called, and Lily took off running, her laughter trailing behind her. Reese held him back for a moment, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For proving me wrong. For being exactly who Lily and I needed, even when I tried to push you away." Trent cupped her face in his hands, drinking in the love he saw there. "Thank you for giving me the chance to prove it." He leaned in, kissing her with all the tenderness he felt, the morning sun warm on their faces. When they pulled apart, Reese's smile was brighter than he'd ever seen it. "We should probably catch up to our daughter before she tells everyone her version of the proposal." "Our daughter," Trent repeated, the words filling his chest with warmth. "I like the sound of that." They walked hand in hand toward their waiting friends and family, the waves rolling in behind them. Lily's voice carried back to them, already launching into an animated retelling of the proposal, complete with dramatic gestures that had everyone laughing. Trent squeezed Reese's hand, feeling the new ring press against his palm. Everything he'd ever wanted, a family, a home, a love worth fighting for, had somehow found him in a small beach town's concession stand. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review on Amazon. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review on Amazon.